So here's another question, Nate. Well, we could still do minutes, right? If some more people come. But would we,
Yeah, yeah, no, yep.
if Jara isn't gonna get there till late, would we want to consider going out of order? Maybe do, I don't know.
Do
Just,
our later things, starting with old business.
Yeah, I mean, if there's four members,
here's
even if
Angus.
even if Angus recused himself for the site plan, it still could be approved.
Yeah, we could still do it.
Yeah,
After Jara arrives. Right,
Yeah.
although,
well, I mean, I guess if
Well,
Angus
it's a
is,
majority of the people participating, right?
I guess is the question if a full recusal, is that considered a participating member?
I wouldn't think so.
Right, so then that'd only be three members.
Yeah, so as long as we voted 2 out of 3, that could pass.
No, I don't think we'd have a quorum of the board to participate. I guess that's the question, is the,
Oh, do we lose
Yeah.
our quorum if Angus recuses, you mean?
yeah, I don't,
Uh-huh.
and Jara's not here.
Well, Jara will be here, and he said it'd be between 6:45 and 7. So
Yeah. I think we'll be okay. It's
as
6:30.
long as we sort of, slow walk the first part.
Right.
Does
Yeah,
that mean we're gonna speed walk at the end?
yes. This doesn't have to be a long meeting.
Pam, do we ever speed walk?
No. But we should start practicing.
I mean,
That
the
would be
council
fun.
waits till, the council waits like 11 o'clock and then they decide that they'll be quick for the last hour, but
That's
for the
too
first
much.
few,
Yeah, well, that's one reason I'm not interested in council.
Yeah, Doug, right? We did it last Monday. I mean, it was actually, they moved pretty quickly, but the discussion took a while.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, no, I've sat there sometimes for 2.5 hours. They had a topic that I thought would come on. They roughly things would be like 8 o'clock. I'd come on at 7:30, 7:45, and then it doesn't get on until like 10:30. It's just
Mhm.
amazing that it takes so long.
Okay, so Nate,
Hmm?
with 4 members, we can do the minutes.
Yep.
We could also do the subdivision
Right.
and hope that Jerry gets there at some point after that, because we don't have a problem until after the subdivision, possibly, if Jerry hasn't arrived. Am I right?
Right.
Okay. Okay, so then whenever you're all ready.
I could give you my PVCP report, which I have after 3 months.
Well, we'll
Slow-
see if we need, see if
Slow
we need
walk that.
to hurry up and get to that, Bruce.
Okay, I'm very eager.
So
Do we
I
want
guess
to get
everybody's here that's coming except for Jara.
Jara? Mhm.
Oh, yeah, I'm glad I made it.
We are
Yeah,
too,
so am I,
Bruce.
Bruce.
You heard that? Oh, I'm not muted, sorry.
No, we heard you.
Do we want to get going? Are you ready, Doug?
I guess so.
Are you sure?
Well, we could just chit chat a little longer and not start until later, but let's go ahead.
Okay, I'll need a few minutes.
We may have to
anyways.
bounce around. We'll see.
All right, hang tight.
Recording in progress.
Okay, Mr. Marshall, you have a quorum of the board. You are the co-host of this meeting. Nate Malloy is with us in the house tonight. My clock says it's 6:35. The attendees are coming in. I think we're good to go.
Okay, Pam, thank you.
You're welcome.
Welcome to the Amherst Planning Board meeting of December 17th, 2025. My name is Doug Marshall, and as chair of the Amherst Planning Board, I'm calling this meeting to order at 6:35 p.m. This meeting is being recorded and is available live stream via Amherst Media. Minutes are being taken. Pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, extended by Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, and further extended by Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2025, this planning board meeting will be conducted via remote means using the Zoom platform. The Zoom meeting link is available on the meeting agenda posted on the town website's calendar listing for this meeting, or go to the planning board webpage and click on a most recent agenda where the Zoom link is listed at the top of the page. No in-person attendance of the public is permitted. However, every effort will be made to ensure the public can access the meeting in real time via technological means. In the event public access is disrupted for reasons of economic hardship or despite our best efforts, we will post an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting on the town's website. Board members, I will do a roll call. When I call your name, unmute yourself, answer affirmatively, and return to mute. Bruce Coldham.
I am here.
Thank you, Bruce. Fred Hartwell.
But Hartwell is here.
Thank you. Jesse Major has told us that he is not going to be attending this evening. I, Doug Marshall, am present. Angus McLeod.
Present.
Thank you. Johanna Newman has also told us that she will be absent. And finally, Jarrah Smith has told us that he will be arriving probably within the next half hour. So we have 4 board members present. That is a quorum of the board. Board members, if technical issues arise and the discussion needs to pause, it will be noted in the minutes. Please use the raise hand function to ask a question or make a comment, and I will call on you to speak. After speaking, remember to remute yourself. To the general public. The general public comment item is reserved for public comment regarding items not appearing later on tonight's agenda. Please be aware the board will not respond to comments during general public comment period. Public comments may also be heard at other times during the meeting when deemed appropriate by the planning board chair. Please indicate you wish to make a comment by clicking the raise hand button when public comment is solicited. If you have joined the Zoom meeting using a telephone, please indicate you wish to make a comment by pressing *9 on your phone. When called on, please identify yourself by stating your full name and address, and put yourself back into mute when finished speaking. Residents can typically express their views for up to 3 minutes, or at the discretion of the planning board chair. If a speaker does not comply with these guidelines or exceeds their allotted time, their participation may be disconnected from the meeting. Okay, time is 6:39, and we'll go right into meeting minutes. We have the minutes from December 3rd of this year as drafted by our hardworking staff. Does anybody have any comments on these minutes as drafted? Any edits to be made? Any typos to be found? No, they were perfect. All right, does anyone want to make a motion to approve our minutes? Don't all speak at once. I'll make the motion then. Bruce?
I will second.
All right, thank you. The motion is on the floor. The motion to approve the minutes for December 3rd as drafted. Are there any further comments, any comments at all about these minutes? All right, we will go into a vote. Starting with you, Bruce.
Aye.
And Fred.
Aye.
And Angus.
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. That's 4 in favor and 3 members absent. The motion carries with a majority of those members present. All right. Next, we will go to our public comment period. This is a general period. When it, as I said, it's for comments about items not appearing later on the agenda. So if you have a comment about one of our hearings, this is not the time for those comments. So members of the public, now's the time to raise your hand if you'd like to make some comments about some other subject other than what we've said we were going to talk about tonight. I usually read the names of the people I can see from the public at this time. I will do that now. I see Jason Bajan. I'm probably butchering that name. Ken Rosenthal, Chris Baker, Mindy Sonner, Sarah Barr, and Tom Reedy. All right, I do see a hand from Ken Rosenthal. We could bring him over and he can remind us of his street address.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall. Ken Rosenthal, 53 Sunset Avenue. I want to thank you again for reading the names of us public members, we public members who are attending. There ought to be a better way to do this, but you figured out the way that at least works for the planning board. No other board does this. I say again, and I'm doing this in public comment, so it's part of the record, so that perhaps it gets the attention of the town manager and perhaps the president of the town council, that there ought to be a way to let everybody who's attending see who else is attending. This is what used to happen when we were in person, but it doesn't, and it can happen on Zoom. It happens from many meetings that I attend. Mr. Chairman, you are the only chair that ever reads the names of all the attendees. Sometimes you have to read dozens of them. And I just want to thank you and also ask other town committees to follow what you do. Thank you again. I will lower my hand.
Okay, thank you, Ken. Appreciate the sentiment. I don't see any other hands. I will pause a moment more and then we'll move on. Anyone else want to make a public comment? Okay, I guess we'll move on. The time is 6:43. And we'll go on to the next item. All right, this is a public hearing. Preliminary subdivision plan. It was advertised for a start of 6:35. So we have passed that point, so we can start. As I said, the time is 6:43. And here's the preamble. In accordance with the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, this public hearing has been duly advertised and notice thereof has been posted and is being held for the purpose of providing the opportunity for interested citizens to be heard regarding SUB 2026-01. Applicant is W.D. Coles Incorporated, properties located on Shutesbury Road. This hearing is continued from December 3rd. Request approval for a 4-lot preliminary subdivision plan under Mass General Law, Chapter 41, Sections 81L and 81S. Parcel consists of, or it's on maps 9B11, 9B12, 9D26, and 9D27, located in the RO zoning district. First of all, are there any board members who should make a disclosure about this topic? I don't see any hands, so we'll move on. Welcome, Tom Reedy. I assume you are here to provide the presentation from the applicant?
I am.
All right, and so I guess without further ado, we'll go ahead.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, members of the board. For the record, Tom Reedy, attorney with Bacon Wilson and Amherst, here on behalf of W.D. Coles. In his application, once again, my apologies, Bruce, I know it's not your favorite, for a preliminary subdivision plan for Flat Hills Estates off of Shutesbury Road. The proposal is for 4 lots to be created off a newly created subdivision roadway. This is, I think, maybe the third time. One of those two, third. Thank you, Bruce. Hopefully there's not a fourth. And the purpose of this is to freeze the zoning. And so this is land that has been subject to diligence, Conservation Commission hearings, Zoning Board of Appeals hearings for a solar project. And ultimately, we have been filing these preliminary subdivision plans to prevent application of the new solar zoning bylaw once it goes into effect. Our
Okay.
obligation is to follow up within 7 months after the filing of the preliminary with a definitive plan. But because the solar zoning bylaw has not yet passed, we're afforded the ability to refile the preliminary plan. My sense is, and we can always ask Mr. Malloy, but my sense is this is probably the last time we're able to file the preliminary plan. And I mentioned solar really to just be transparent about what the purpose is, but your direction here is to treat this like a subdivision. And so, nothing has changed. And I'll show the plan in a moment. Nothing has changed from the 2 previous times we submitted and received approval of this plan. It's the same here. And I suspect we'll be back with a definitive sometime within 7 months from the filing date, because things are starting to move forward with the solar zoning bylaw as well as the specific solar project here. So I will share the plan just for completeness.
Tom,
Yes.
can I just interrupt a moment to just say
Please.
that Jara Smith joined us just about at 6:45, 2 minutes ago. So we now have 5 members present.
Perfect. Thank
Go
you.
ahead.
Thank you. So what we've got on the left side of the screen, Shutesbury Road, we've got the parcel in total outlined in black. As you'll see, it goes a little bit off screen. I've just zoomed in a little bit. You've got a conforming subdivision roadway with a cul-de-sac. You've got just a general location of the proposed stormwater basin on the southwesterly portion of the site. And then you've got 4 building lots, lot 1, 24.4 acres, lot 2, 30.2 acres, lot 3, 37.1 acres, and lot 4, 36.8 acres. And so, which would all be compliant with zoning based upon frontage and lot area in this zoning district. And so really just simply, like I said, this is preliminary plan to free zoning, but we're still going through the preliminary subdivision plan process. If you'd like, I can answer questions on the specific plan, or I can take it down and we can have more discussions.
Tom, why don't we allow some questions about the specific plan? Although you haven't changed your plan, we do have a couple of new board members for whom this is the first subdivision plan that we've talked about. So, board members, are there any questions about what we're actually doing here? We're supposed to be sort of ignoring the likelihood that this subdivision will never be built, because this plan is here almost solely for freezing the zoning. But we're supposed to treat it like we're actually approving a subdivision plan that could be built. So I don't know whether there's anything in particular that you guys want to talk about, but let's entertain questions if there are any. Angus.
Thank you. So I'm trying to get a sense of this project, and so I mean, one, it might be helpful to just hear a little bit more about the intended solar project, but I understand that that's not necessarily germane. But I guess the question that I have is about the request for a sewage exemption, and if you could talk a little bit more about that request and the rationale for that request.
Sure. So first, unfortunately, we can talk about the solar, but it really isn't germane to this, because it's, my personal practice is that if I'm submitting a preliminary subdivision plan, but the intent is really to free zoning, I'm transparent about that intent. There is no obligation for us to be transparent. There is no obligation for us to say we're going to freeze it. You know, we could come in and just say, here's a preliminary subdivision plan, and then follow up with a definitive, and then subsequently, you know, next day file, after a zoning bylaw or ordinance is changed, we could file a site plan review or special permit for a use that would otherwise no longer be allowed. So I give that background just because obviously I'm in front of this board often. I respect the board, and then just as a matter of maybe honesty and reputation, I proceed that way. So, you know, unfortunately, there will be an opportunity, I'll say, once a plan is formally submitted, it's a zoning board of appeals special permit for the solar. We will submit that in the coming months. I can't give you any more definitive answer because I don't have it. We are currently, and here I said I wasn't going to talk about solar. We are this evening still going through the Conservation Commission process for an order of resource area delineation, which I suspect will be continued to January because of some shakeup with that commission. And so I'd suspect sometime in, let's say, February, March, there's a formal application that obviously is transmitted to this board. And so at that time, if this board wanted to talk about the substance of the solar, we'd be happy to come in and to talk about it. So just to address that, as for the sewer exemption, so the way that the Amherst subdivision rules and regulations work is that you cannot have well and septic both in the same subdivision. And so the request here is for a waiver of that, where we could have well and septic, and the justification here would be because the lots are so large that we think that we could do it safely. If at the definitive stage, the board denied that waiver for whatever reason, then there would just be a condition that if the subdivision were to be built, that water were to be brought up. And I mean, frankly, in a hypothetical situation, there could be an agreement to do that. Because again, as Mr. Marshall mentioned, the intent is not to build this. If there was ever going to be a subdivision here, there would be more density than what you're seeing, but that's another conversation for another day. So as far as the request for that waiver, the justification is the size of the lots and allowing waiver from the dual existence of well and or the waiver from the prohibition on the dual existence of well and septic.
Angus, is that would answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, part of the question about the solar, I guess, is because of the sewer exemption. Because if the plan is not to actually build a subdivision here, then I'd be much more in favor of any kind of a sewage or water exemption. So, but I hear what you're saying, and that makes sense.
Okay. All right. Anyone else? Anybody? Okay. I will ask the members of the public. Is there anybody from the public who would like to make a comment on this application? All right. I am not seeing anybody in the public raising their hands. One last chance for board members. Any comment? I guess not. Oh, Bruce.
Well, the reason for so little comment, certainly for me, is that the only thing changed here is that Tom's sporting a beard, which I guess is progress. But so we would, I guess, ordinarily go through findings and so forth, which we've already done twice, and nothing has changed. Can we move a motion to, I guess, Doug, Nate, should we probably go through findings and conditions here?
Yeah, it seemed like we ought to at least glance in that direction before we vote. Nate?
Yeah, I'll share my screen. It's really, I had sent that document today, the letter we would send saying that, excuse me, the board, approves the waiver request. So one is the scale of the plan. It's not 1 to 40, and then this water and sewer supply. And then previously the condition was that they consult with fire and board of health before filing a definitive plan. So, I mean, there's really, as a preliminary plan, there's kind of really no recourse if we don't take action. The idea is that we would want to provide some guidance to the applicant. I think there's, those are, that's what was said before. They'd have to complete a definitive within 7 months to get the zoning freeze. There's an ability to submit another preliminary or a different preliminary, until there's a certain specific time frame and zoning changes. But Tom said there probably won't be a likely one. Different plans, you have to go through all the engineering. So there's really no findings to be made right now. In the subdivision regulations, it says that, the plan was shown in black and white. There is a version that has different lines of color to denote, different things in terms of the street layout. So it meets all that. There really isn't, anything at this time to go into detail in terms of like drainage or things. That's all in the definitive. So it could be as simple as, those 2 waivers in that condition. And I'll get my screen shared. So this is the one from May, with the a recording of the vote and then these waivers and the one condition. So if there's other things you want to add in terms of conditions, you could. These are just the 2 waivers that are part of this.
Bruce?
I would move approval of the subdivision application, conditioned with including the 2 waivers. I won't read them, but they're there, and with the single condition related to the consultations with the fire departments and Board of Health as articulated in the May letter, and to close the public hearing. And I think that's it.
All right, thank you, Bruce.
Second.
Thank you, Angus. Any discussion? One last chance for board or for public comment? Not seeing any. All right, we'll go ahead and vote. Again, starting with you, Bruce.
Aye.
And Fred.
Aye.
Angus.
Aye.
Jara.
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. That's 5 in favor, 2 members absent. Motion passes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom.
Of course.
Thanks for stopping by.
Of course. I'm here for old business too. So Pam, I don't know if you want to kick me out and I'll
I'm
sit
gonna
around until it's my turn.
I'm gonna try, but if we lose you, please come on back.
Okay.
Okay.
Be careful what you wish for.
I know. Remove John Holmes. Oh,
All right. Moving on, item 4 on the agenda, another public hearing. This one was advertised for 6:45. It's now 6:59, so we're fine time-wise. In accordance with the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, this public hearing has been duly advertised and notice thereof has been posted and is being held for the purpose of providing the opportunity for interested citizens to be heard regarding Site Plan Review 2026-02. Applicant is Amherst College. Address is 40 Dickinson Street. This hearing is continued from December 3rd of this year. Request site plan review approval under section 3.339 of the zoning bylaw to modify previously approved site plan review 2014-00006 and add a vehicle washing area with stormwater and sewer connection. Construct a 20 by 30 foot salt shed with 6 foot high block walls and a 9 foot high metal arch roof and repaving, comma, in the BL Limited Business Zoning District on map 14B, parcel 52. Board member disclosure.
Amherst College is my employer, and so I'd like to not participate in the voting and be moved down to a panelist.
All right, Angus will recuse himself. So we will have 4 remaining members, a majority of the board. And also, we believe that we are fine with, if we decide to vote on this site plan, we will need a simple majority of the members present. All right, looks like Jason is back.
Yep. How's everybody doing tonight?
Welcome back. I guess you're here with hopefully some improved plans.
Yes. I also have Chris Baker, who he's on right now. If we can add him to the panelist, that'd be great.
I thought I did. I'm so sorry, Chris.
I did that, Pam.
Thanks, Nate.
Are you undoing him while I'm trying to do him, Nate?
No, I
There
just
he
promoted
is.
him when he raised his hand.
Okay, there he
All
goes.
right, welcome, Chris.
Thank you. All right, so we did submit some materials, a revised site plan with some updated landscaping. We, tried to address everything that the board discussed during our last meeting. So I will actually share my screen. Go. So here is our revised site plan, and you can see we've actually decided, instead of just doing planters, to go ahead and remove this area of asphalt that's adjacent to the front of the building, just to create more definition between the sidewalk and also to re-landscape an area and get rid of some of the impervious surfaces. The other thing that we did was add landscaping around the salt shed. And you can see here we tried to, build out a screen with a variety of different plantings. Here you can see some of the varieties, some varieties that we chose that we're trying to get some mix of evergreens that would be able to provide that screening. And so there's a Japanese maple, fir, cypress. So we're hoping that, these will look nice as a screening. And then there's going to be some larger canopy shade trees in the front here, kind of away from the salt shed, that will also provide some, screening of the building from Route 9 and hopefully screening of the salt shed from the walkway. And I think, Jay, you want to jump in and discuss the lighting?
Yep. Yeah, so I will also share my screen. So one thing we took a look at was the lighting that's on the building and the original lighting to what we have now. And I know, Bruce, you had made a comment. So we went back with our electricians. So we are going to be replacing the lighting that are over the overhead doors with these new fixtures. These have what are called full cutoff shields. So these would make these light fixtures dark sky compliant as requested. And those would be the new fixtures that we would put along the loading dock doors. So what this full shielding means is if you were to have a horizontal line there, these shields prevent any uplighting to prevent the light pollution and that glare you would get. So this is the lighting that we will be ordering to replace on over the loading docks. Another thing that was requested from the board was our investigation on location of the shed. So this is just a survey plan that we had looked at when starting to investigate locating our salt shed using the different setbacks. So here were the 2 proposed locations. So just to orientate yourself, here's Dickinson Street. You have your parking lot and College Street that runs down below here. So around the back of the building was one of the first locations we had looked at. Unfortunately, when looking at the parcel and where our property line ends and the setbacks we would have to meet, the first location tucked back here, there's the oil tank pad that's existing to the building. What that ended up doing was blocking the access for any emergency vehicles to be able to get around the building, as well as any of our facility built vehicles to get around. So we also looked at another orientation around the other side of the building, but then that also had a similar problem where for an emergency vehicle needing, a 10-foot roadway, we had a pinch point at this corner of the building. So when looking at um, the rest of the locations, that's how we determined being able to put something towards the front of the building to meet our setbacks and keep a flow of traffic for emergency vehicles and our vehicles around the entire property. So this has been submitted to the planning board now. So those are kind of the two things on our end for the lighting and then the location. And then with the plantings, I really do feel, I think this was a great idea. Especially with some of the oaks that would, when fully grown, and also during the fall time, to pull in some of that fall foliage around this building. I think that's gonna be nice to shade the building, but then kind of provide that natural New England vernacular of kind of the colors from the roadway. I open up to any questions that the board may have at this time, just from our updates that we put together, or any questions you may have.
All right, thank you, Jason and Chris. I guess I'll start off. I don't see any hands up yet. Chris, on the planted area that you've added between the sidewalk and the building, is there still a strip of pavement, let's say, right next to the building? I can't, the way I
Yeah, I think there would be possibly just to.
Why don't you bring your plan back up?
Let's see. Yeah, I think we're gonna have to go out and look at it or what's going on with the foundation and kind of where that meets.
Well, I mean, yeah, so that drawing looks like it shows a little bit of pavement along the edge of the building. Is that right?
Yeah, and I think that would be the idea, even if it was just like a kind of a drip strip
Yeah,
was
that's
there.
fine. Okay,
Yeah.
I just wanted to be clear about that. What does the word snow at the top of that planted area mean?
That is just the survey was taken during last winter, so there was snow on the ground.
Oh, I
So
see.
that's
Okay.
part of the base survey.
Okay. All right, and then so the western edge of this new planted area is right along the property line?
It is, yes, it's basically right on the sidewalk.
So you're saw cutting a portion of the sidewalk.
Right along, like we would basically saw cut at the edge of the sidewalk. So we
All
would
right, so
leave.
you're not, well, I mean, right now, there's no indication of where the sidewalk ends and your property starts.
So the bituminous walk that's listed and this line that goes essentially along where we're proposing to pave and then up where the loam and seed would be, that is the edge of the sidewalk.
Okay. All right. Jason, a question for you. The fixtures that you propose, you would replace the ones near the loading, the overhead doors. Will you also replace the one over the entry?
The entry is a dark sky compliant fixture, so there wasn't a plan to replace it. It meets the compliance.
Okay, so there'd be two different types of fixtures on the building.
Yeah, so one would be a wall pack. So the one that I previously had is a wall pack type, and the one that's over the door is a little bit more decorative because it kind of comes off the building. So it is kind of distinguished between a wall pack and an entry light.
And the existing one, I remember it was white. Would the new wall packs match it in color?
We will make everything match. I think the one that's currently there is black. The housing is black, but regardless, we would make sure
I mean, matching the one over the color of the one over the entry.
Yes, we'll make sure that the colors match.
All right, Bruce?
I think the planting plan that you're proposing around the shed is pretty fulsome, and various types of planting, bigs and smalls, coniferous and deciduous, and that seems as though it should satisfies me. It seems pretty handsome. But we were, I think, hoping that there would also be a planting of some sort in that grassed area. Is there any reason why you might not put one of those Japanese maples there, as well as putting one or wherever, how many over on the other side? Is there any reason why we don't have a planting there as opposed to just grass?
The only reason the grounds department looked at that as only grass is when you're looking at the building, there are planters that are they're fixed on the windows. So as you're walking by the building, it basically, your perspective would be grass on the lawn and then planters that are on the windows. So they kind of just, one of the planters takes care of the planters there. So they didn't want to put a tree to block that view.
I would advocate for a single Japanese maple in that location as well. It seems that they're a small, manageable tree and would seem to be in scale with the sidewalk. So I'll see what my colleagues have to say. But other than that, it all seems as though you heard what we said last time and have dealt with it. So that aside, I think I'm a happy camper.
All right, anybody else from the board? I do see one public hand. All right. I guess I'll go ahead and call on the public hand that's been raised. Pam, if we could bring over Mindy Sonner.
Hello,
Hello, welcome.
thank you.
You're Mindy Sonner and your street address is?
20 Dickinson Street.
Thank you.
I want to say that this is a big improvement. I'm pleased to see it. I think the landscape plan is much better. I agree with Bruce that a little plot of grass in front of the building, I don't think it's going to quite do it. The window planters are nothing in the winter and not much in the summer months either. So the two Japanese maples that are currently planted, one of them is not going to make it. I don't know if a Japanese maple would survive there, but I do think it needs something tall there. As far as the landscape plan around the salt shed, I think it's lovely, the mix of plants. The large trees are not named, at least I couldn't see that they were named, and it was just mentioned that they were oaks that would get fall color, and of course oaks don't get fall color. So something that would get fall color would be nice. My concern about that planting is I really don't think it's going to provide much shielding from Dickinson Street. And it's hard to see because the whole plan, the plan that's being shown doesn't show the entire lot. It just shows where the salt shed is going to go in the current building. But if you were to see the entire lot, you would see that it is become over the years a huge parking lot that's heavily used. And when you're walking along the asphalt sidewalk, there is not a delineation between the asphalt sidewalk and the asphalt parking lot. It's a long stretch that feels like you're walking through a parking lot. There's no shade trees, so it's just hot in the summer and it's really unsightly. It's become much more unsightly over the years. And so, I realize it's not part of this salt shed project and maybe it's not appropriate to bring it up, but the whole site has become not nice. Maybe it seems trivial, but the purple garage doors on the building, I mean, the site is not within Amherst College and they just seem really inappropriate for the neighborhood. And so overall, I would say from Dickinson Street, the new plan is not addressing anything that's just become ugly over the years.
All right, thank you, Mindy.
Thank you.
Board members, we've heard from Bruce, we've heard from Mindy. How are you feeling about the plan as proposed here? It looks like we've kind of lost Jara, so looks like,
No, there he is.
Not here.
yeah. So Jara, we do need you to participate, so because we've got to maintain our quorum. If
Yeah.
that's
Oh, I've been
possible.
listening. Yeah,
Okay.
I've been listening in. Yeah.
Okay. So, Jason, I guess I'll ask you. You know, we've had two comments about the need to soften the view a little bit more from Dickinson Street. How do you feel about a little bit more planting there along the street, at least in that what the area that's now grass? And then, you know, Mindy's made the comment about the purple doors again. How you know, how strongly do you guys feel you really need those doors to be purple, and how you know, how much Amherst College colors is really needed there?
Mhm. Yeah, I think I'll start with Mindy's comment. I think I definitely hear the comments on the building and the site as its whole. I think for this project, if it was more towards a renovation of the building, it would be definitely something we can really look into. For this project, it's primarily just on the salt shed and, you know, some of the pavement work. So the comments I would like to address are just related to the salt shed and the pavement work at this time. So I think the landscaping side of things, I could definitely go back to the grounds department and at that entrance, look to see what we could do to satisfy the comments Mindy has and Bruce has for plantings at the front of the building. It definitely could be something where we can add in, you know, potentially a tree. I do know we want to keep that area from where it was repaved by DPW and we're putting grass back in. So I don't know if it's going to affect anything on that end for the DPW. But for us, what we can do is be sure to look at it and potentially add some more plantings if that satisfies the board.
Well, I believe more planting would require a new site plan. And so should we just continue this and let you go back and talk about it and bring it back again?
Well,
I see, go ahead.
I think what I would like to ask is if that could be, since it would just be that one area, if we could get a conditional approval for our plan as it stands, and that could just be something as we select, maybe something we could submit to the board after the fact, because since it would just be that one area.
Nate, is that procedurally feasible?
Yeah, we've done that in the past. I would usually try to minimize conditions like that, but a lot of decisions have them. So I think given that, it would just be this one area, it's something we could document and bring back to a public meeting after the fact. So,
And we could put a time limit on that they need to come back within,
yep.
6 months or a year or something.
I mean, you could even just say, before any permit, so there needs to be a building permit for the salt shed. You could even just say in 2 months, that they return to the board and provide an updated landscaping plan at a public meeting. Doesn't have to be tied to anything. It could just be a time frame.
Mm-hmm. Well, that would be, it seems like a little bit more planting and maybe eliminate the purple, and that we'll all call that a win. Bruce, I see your hand.
Yeah, so I was going to make a motion to that effect, actually, because I did think that we could, we didn't, I didn't want to put anyone, us or the applicant, through a continuation here. It seems unnecessary.
Yeah.
So I think, now we went through the findings last time, I think. I can't remember. Do we have already some conditions, Nate, that we've established? I think
Yeah,
we've.
I think we could walk through them again. There was a few that still needed to be updated. There were only
But
I think
before we
could
do that, I see that, Pam, do you think that Mindy's got her hand up again?
I do.
All right. So before we get to that,
I'll
Bruce,
put mine down.
okay.
Are
I
you
guess
ready?
let's bring Mindy back.
Okay.
Hello
Hi.
again, Mindy.
Hi. So I just have two things I want to say. One is, there's been no further discussion about protecting the wetland across the street, which is home to a lot of animals and birds and frogs. And I just want to make sure that it's being attended to and that you're feeling satisfied that that is being provided for and that is not going to get polluted. And my second comment is that I still don't see that the salt shed is shielded from view on the Dickinson Street side. And I do find it disappointing that we've just come down to a little patch in front of the current building that might get some little planting, but that whole area between the sidewalk and the parking lot will remain the way it is. I really think Amherst College has the ability to do much better for the town of Amherst than that. Thank you.
All right. Okay, board members, we've heard those comments, and I guess I'm going to be looking for whether anybody's feeling like we should push a little harder on the applicant. Bruce?
You could bring the plan back up again, but it seems to me that the salt shed is screened from Dickinson Street. I don't quite understand Mindy's concern. I mean, of course, it's not surrounded by trees, but there's a whole parking area and entry and so forth that doesn't really lend itself to having trees. And I'm prepared to imagine to accept that we can't surround the building with trees. But as I recall from looking at that site plan that we were shown, there seems to be screening on so until you get to that point there where the hand is, or maybe down a bit, from there on you can see the shed, or maybe, but from Route 9 to that point, the screening would seem to be fairly effective. I don't see how we can how the applicant can do more screening without putting trees in the bituminous concrete parking areas. So I don't understand. I mean, I think that that we've seen a satisfactory response to our concern with screening. So I'm not sharing concerns from so far as that's concerned. I do think that we can do better on that north side, as I've said, and that'll be the one condition that, well, one of the two conditions I'd add. But if Nate, if you've got those and you've got them in editable form, we could create them, or you could create them with us.
Yeah, I wanted to ask Jason, Mindy mentioned that you've got oaks there along the south side. But you did talk about the fall color. Are oaks more appropriate for that location rather than maples? Maybe that's a question for Chris. I don't know.
I know that the trees were chosen to be successful in a full sun environment, but I don't know the answer to that. We can look at swapping them out with the maples.
Nate?
Yeah, I mean, it's the type of oak tree does have a fall color, and it's probably hardy in terms of why it was chosen, both for full sun and, other, urban environment. So it's a nut-tail oak. So it's not, like a pin oak or a white oak. It's a different kind of oak that I think would be successful there. So I don't, and it does have, a fall color. If you look it up online, it has like anywhere from like a red to like an umber, burnt umber, maybe slightly orange. So it's not say as vibrant as a sugar maple, but a sugar maple, they're just not even recommended much anymore, unfortunately, in this area.
All right, thanks, Nate. All right, Nate, why don't you have your
Yes.
findings or conditions?
Yeah, we can start with the conditions and the findings. We can go up above. So we had, we had gone through these. What's highlighted is what would be changed, the revision dates of the plans. We'd add the landscape plan. We have our generic kind of standard conditions. Substantial changes would come back. The plan expires in 2 years. We looked at all these. What we, the ones highlighted in gray were ones that I think we'd want to reassess this evening. We say no more than 11 vehicles parked on the property as shown on the site plan. If that's an issue, Jay, as far as I can tell, that's what was there. That's kind of the number.
Yep, no issues there.
We say there should be no vehicle parked in front of the building, but now that that's becoming grass, I don't know if this condition's if it's necessary. So originally, that paved area in front of the office, the concern was that some vehicle could pull up there. I don't know if we still want to have something like this.
Well, we still don't want any vehicles there.
True.
Yeah, the reason why we actually opted to coordinate with the grounds department is to avoid the potential of a vehicle parking there, even in the short term. So that's why we went with just removing the asphalt and putting grass.
Sure. And then, 8, there shall be pavement markings delineating the public sidewalk. So, I'm not sure if what the plan is, if you still will have a stripe, because there is a wide swath where there's pavement. So I don't, if there's anything to be done there with condition 8 or remove it.
Jason, do you have any objection to running a stripe along the edge of the sidewalk?
Can I just share my plan real quick? I just want to make sure I'm
Sure.
Yep.
following completely.
Yeah, I mean, I can even, if you're sharing.
Yeah, Nate, are you thinking just running something right down the sidewalk like this for a white
I
stripe?
think that's what was envisioned, I think.
Yeah, and we're going to be striping the parking lot, so I don't have any problem with it. I just want to make sure
Yeah.
I understand.
Yeah, no, just something like that. I mean, I think it's when you're walking, it's pretty clear that there's, you'll see the pavement cut and it's a sidewalk. I just want to, say whether it's for vehicles parking or for someone, they just.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Nope.
I think it'd be useful to delineate where the edge of the sidewalk is and where your vehicle parking lot starts.
Yeah, I don't think that's a problem at all.
And, you could break it where at the curb cut so that.
Exactly.
That
So
makes
it
some
just
sense.
showed that separation. Yep,
Yeah,
that's good.
all right,
So
Nate, so
if
that
we
one,
think if we think condition 8 describes that clearly, we can leave that in.
I think that's fine.
We can mention the revised, I just put this up here, the light specifications. And then, this condition right here, we can just.
Yeah. Light
remove
fixture
this.
specification.
I'm sorry, Bruce?
A light fixture specifications or.
Yeah, I actually get it a little bit more detailed than this. This is
Oh, okay, okay.
this is, for a placeholder. I mean, it would be something like this, like light fixture sheet, whatever it is. I just don't
Yeah.
have
Understood.
it
Thank
there.
you.
But I'm not sure for this condition, do we need to, have anything more other than we can just, if we remove this,
Yep.
that sufficient. We have the hours of exterior lighting. At one point we had talked about, what really are the hours, Jay? So I just want to make sure we have that correctly noted here.
So it's 8 p.m. to 6 a.m.
Mhm.
And then during the winter time, they start the lighting earlier, around 6 p.m. to 6 a.m.
So that's summer,
So this is the summer, and then
Right.
winter.
parenthesis summer, and then you can may as well do the winter if we're going to have it in.
And what were the other hours? Sorry.
6 p.m. to 6 a.m.
Okay.
winter. Yep.
Yeah. All right. In terms of like, the monitoring of the wetland, we have this condition that worked with the conservation agent on, we discussed it last time. So, once per month over a 12-month period during a rain event, having, it can just be Amherst College staff taking pictures where the outfall is to make sure there's no, any chemicals from the wash basin. It's really, there's really no outfall across the street. It gets funneled and goes down actually south of Route 9. The oil water separator, I'm not sure if we still want to have this move forward. There were updated plans when the oil water separator looked like it was, a new one was installed in 2014-15, and the town engineer is satisfied it meets the standards. So I think this condition could be removed.
Okay.
Okay, fine with me.
The regulations haven't changed since 2014.
I'm relying on the town engineer
Yeah,
saying that, he was satisfied.
okay.
We still have that the drain covers would be tested with staff to make sure they work. I think the ones here, we have shall be screened from view from Dickinson Street. We had, this was proposed. Now we have a planting plan again.
It can
Yeah, I
go.
think this would go away
Yep. The
as
one,
long as we're referencing the planting plan.
yeah, the new one would be something, what's in yellow here. We can get there. The new pavement, again, it doesn't interfere with the sidewalk, so we can remove this as well. This 16 and 17 are new, so shall maintain the existing sidewalk and propose changes, including parking lot paving and new lawn in front of the office portion of the building. So some of this work may be within the right of way, and so this is just saying that the applicant would coordinate with the town engineer and public works to do that.
Is it common for a private entity to maintain a sidewalk? If it's on their property, you're saying?
No, I think based on the plans, it looks like some of the pavement that they're working on, it's really close to the edge of the right of way. And so, it's existing and it's just changing it. So the idea is that they could coordinate that with the Public Works Department.
Well, I guess I'm just sort of, I'm stuck on, you're saying the applicant shall maintain the existing sidewalk. Is that common for a private applicant to have to maintain a public sidewalk that's not on their property?
Oh, sure. You know what? That's probably not a good, I didn't mean maintain it as in maintenance. I meant not disrupt or disturb the existing during construction so that they wouldn't.
Okay, so we need to change it then.
Yeah.
Not disrupt.
Shall preserve the existing sidewalk during construction.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it could just be as simple as that.
Yeah, I'm not sure how you work in the rest of it there.
I don't think we need to. I think it's just as long as we maintain the sidewalk.
Yeah.
Or preserve it during construction.
Okay.
And so the landscaping, this is usually some similar condition would have, shall be installed in accordance with the landscape plan. This is from a previous decision. We could say approved on this evening. And then, it shall be maintained, continually maintained. And if we want to say before the issuance of a certificate of occupancy that it gets installed. I don't know if we want to have a minimum height of shrub plantings at time of planting. They did have
Yep.
some, some things, I don't know if that's, 3 feet is, the trees were a pretty big caliper. I'm not sure about the others. If that's, and then condition 18 would be have them come back and present at a public meeting the changes in front of the office
Right,
building.
right. So that was additional planting on the
Right.
grass.
And is that, you want to tie it to the certificate of occupancy or building permit, or this should just be prior to the issuance of,
Well, I think I would use certificate of occupancy. I mean, nobody's going to plant anything for another 4
Right.
or 5 months, and they may want to pull a permit sooner.
So
yeah, I guess,
could I add something on that item there?
Sure.
Because I do want us all to remember it's not a dwelling unit where somebody will be living. So
Right.
there's no traditional certificate of occupancy. It's going to be it's a shed that's going to be storing salt. So there's no fire suppression, there's no power, there's no requirement in that sense.
But you would be pulling a building permit, wouldn't you?
We would have a permit, yes.
Yes.
So how does that permit get closed if there's no C of O?
It would still get closed out, but the terms will be a little different than being able to occupy a building, because there's no real building to occupy.
I mean, we could say prior to the closing out or finalizing. I'm not sure. I don't know if we'd probably call it a certificate of inspection, not occupancy.
Well,
Final,
I
ins-
mean,
final inspection.
Final
Right.
inspection, yeah.
by inspectional services or something.
Isn't that understood?
Okay, maybe.
And so if we think, let me change the date, December. I don't
Yes,
know if we, yeah.
Final inspection of I guess it should be the building permit granting authority. Which is to say inspection services, I suppose.
Right. Yeah, usually we would just say the final inspection.
Yeah. It's of the agency, not the instrument.
Not the owner and not the contractor.
Yeah.
Right.
Granting authority is fine. Building permit granting authority. I mean, we know who that is, but this works.
All right. And then 18, we can work on the applicant shall submit for review and approval at a public meeting of the planning board, a revised or a final landscape plan.
There be a definitive landscape plan? Yeah.
No.
No, we're good. Sorry. Within.
You say prior to the final inspection as well, or
Didn't you say within 2 months? Wasn't that a?
or whatever the board want, I guess, whatever. It's really the plan, it's not the planting. So whatever the board thinks is
Yeah,
reasonable.
I mean, if Jason thinks 2 months are adequate, that would get him back.
It keeps it fresh in our
We
minds.
wouldn't
That's
have
all.
completely forgotten this project by then.
Yeah, that's fine. 2 months is fine.
So are we going to say that it needs to, or we'd like it to have some additional planting along Dickinson Street?
Well, I think
I mean,
Jason knows what is likely to gain approval.
I think we could have something like that.
so Jason, that obligates you to at least show up with one more plant.
I think we can review it and make something happen there.
But this would be
Okay.
at a public meeting, so it's not a new application or an amendment to the application. It's something like, what Tom Reedy is doing later this evening. They come in and say, here, we are submitting the new plan.
And will that get filed?
Yeah, well, the idea is that we would keep it on file with the town. It doesn't, it's not a new application, so it doesn't get, the plans don't get filed with the registry. It could get filed with the town clerk and inspection services and planning department.
Okay.
And U19 would be the softening the door color if we care enough to add it.
Yeah, that's up to the board. I think paint color is
Yeah.
hard. Even the local historic district doesn't regulate paint color.
Yeah, we've had color beaten out of us on the local historic district commission. We're not allowed to do it. So that's part of the reason why I asked. Are we even allowed to get involved, or can we simply appeal to the applicant to go back to green?
Well, I mean, we are here to review the impact of the work on the surrounding area. That's what our purpose is, but the purple color is not part of the work. So I think you could argue it both ways.
Oh, right, yes.
Jason or Nate, what would you think if we edited the text here to say, in addition to a final landscape plan, and that they return with a response to the objections to the existing building colors
I would say that's
at that meeting? I mean, the response could be, we don't want to change it, but the response could also be, yeah, we hear you and we'll repaint it.
I would say that's something that the applicant and the town can continue to discuss. It's not a condition, that's really enforceable, and it doesn't do anything.
Okay.
So,
all right.
I'd rather, if we want the colors changed, we'd write it. I think it's getting to be a little unreasonable in terms of what's being proposed.
Yeah.
So, the applicants heard from, an abutter. I think the town could work with the college. I'm not sure it's necessary if we want,
Well,
to me, a
there's
condition
no,
that's
there's,
enforceable, right, and makes, does something. If they want to, if Jay says it's fine to come back and we put it in there, I would. Otherwise, I don't think it's necessary.
well, they wouldn't need a change to the site plan review to come back and change the color of the building.
Right.
Jara.
Thank you. Well, I'll take up Bruce's offer to make an appeal to the applicant, because I think that adding it as a condition may be unreasonable or unnecessary, but I do want to point out that a neighbor has spent hours of her life trying to use the biggest megaphone that she can to advocate for changing the color of this garage door. I think that it would be wonderful of Amherst College to continue to be a good neighbor and to listen to that complaint and come up with some either softening color or like a mural competition with the art students or something like that. I would behoove Amherst College to listen to that complaint and figure out a way to proactively address it, even if it's not germane to this particular topic. But I don't think it needs to be a specified condition.
All right, thanks, Jara. All right, do we have our draft pretty well together? Nate, do we need to go through some more of it?
This is a modification of the 14 permit. The idea would be
we did this last time.
Changed to the first few conditions. The general hours of operation are 7 to 3:30, except for snow removal operations. Mechanical equipment and others would be on timers to minimize impact to the neighborhood. What we would be removing, smoking shall be limited to the south side of the building, deliveries on the south side. We'd be removing the remainder of the permits, which had to do with submitting revised plans or different things that to me are now irrelevant. So.
Yep. All right, so we're pretty well through this.
Yeah, and then just for findings, because there have been some changes, I think we had gone through all of these findings, and there, again, this was a 14 permit. I think would just be, there was a few these findings. So, they did show some an alternative to where the salt shed could be located. So, does it avoid it to the extent feasible? In terms of its architectural style and existing conditions. So I think, I'm okay with these.
I don't know if it really relates to the existing buildings. Do we have to say that?
I mean, it is an industrial use. The building was a factory, but if we wanted to find some other way to describe that, I think they've done as much screening as they can. I mean, they've actually reduced the lot coverage, what they're proposing.
Right.
If we wanted to work on, this one, we could.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know how significant or how worthwhile it would be to change that, but I don't find that those salt sheds relate to anything, but All right.
All right.
Does anybody have any comments about this? We've heard from some of the public. Are there any other members of the public that want to speak? I'm not sure we've got any actual totally disinterested members of the public that are even available to speak, except for Mindy. So, all right. Does anybody want to make a motion, Bruce?
Yes, I'll move acceptance or approval of the applicant's application number with consistent with the findings expressed in 1124 and with the conditions 1 through 20,
Whatever.
I think, or 21, as discussed, and to close the public hearing.
Okay. I'll go ahead and second that. All right. Any further discussion? No? All right. All right, we'll go ahead and vote. I'll go from the end of the last name alphabet this time, starting with you, Jara.
Aye.
Thank you. Fred,
Aye.
Bruce,
Aye.
and I'm an aye as well. That's 4 in favor, 1 recusal, 2 absences. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you all for your time.
We'll
Thank
see
you.
you within a couple months.
See you then.
Thank you. All right, time is 7:49, and I'm thinking maybe this would be a good time to take our 5-minute break before we bring Angus back and continue on our agenda with a general housing discussion. So please come back by about 5 minutes before 8. Thank you. All right, time is 7:56. Please turn on your camera when you come back. Looks like we've got Angus back. We're waiting for Bruce. Everybody else is back. All right, there's Bruce. So, all right, time is 7:57. We can resume our meeting. We'll go to the fifth item on the agenda, which is general housing discussion. Nate?
Excuse me, hey, Doug, I was gonna ask if we could do old business first, knowing that
Tom's there.
Tom's here, yeah.
Yeah. Sure, that's fine with me. Old business. This will be a discussion of site plan review 2018-11 and special permit 2018-1 for U Drive LLC. See if I can bring up the rest of it here. In accordance with conditions, including number 3 of the site plan review and special permit decisions for 70 University Drive, approved under section 3.325 to construct a mixed-use building with residential units and office, associated parking and site improvements, map 13B, parcel 33 in the BL zoning district. Welcome back, Tom.
Thank you, and thanks for taking me out of order. I was looking forward to the housing discussion. Maybe I'll stick around, but now no compulsion, so I appreciate it. For the record, Tom Reedy, attorney with Bacon Wilson out of Amherst, here on behalf of, I think, both Barry Roberts and Cinda Jones. As you noted, Mr. Chairman, condition number 3 of the site plan review special permit from 2018 for the site at 70 University Drive, which is a 36-unit mixed-use building along University Drive, requires a public meeting and the review of the management plan and the discussion of compliance with the conditions from that permit. And so that's what I'm here for. As I mentioned,
Tom, just can you elaborate? Are Barry and Cinda both owners?
No, so great. And I'll share my screen just quickly to show you, to just orient everyone with where we're talking about. So it's this parcel right here for orientation. Amity Street's here. Route 9's further to the south. You can see a little portion of it here to the right. This is that recently approved, what will be that 5-story, strike that, 6-story building that Barry is starting to build. This is Haymarket Square. So this is that 70 University Drive, and that's what we're talking about. And so Barry currently owns it and manages it, and Cinda is going to be purchasing it, and Pat Kamens is going to be managing it. And so I think Barry's really happy. I mean, Cinda is obviously a longtime Amherst resident, comes from an Amherst family, and Amherst landlord, and Kamens manages a lot of properties in town. And so I think Barry's really pleased to keep it in the family, so to speak, to have it go to local landowner and local management. So when I mention Barry and Cinda, I'm here because it's transitioning from Barry to Cinda.
Okay.
And the condition 3 is change of ownership, or, and I think it specifically says, if no longer managed by Barry Roberts. So when his name gets in there, we have to at least address it. So that's why I'm here. Nate had sent along the permit with some areas highlighted. I'm not sure that I confirmed to him. I think I did, but they're all, we believe that all have been complied with. I can go through them. Nate, I don't know if you want to show it on the screen, but we're comfortable.
Why don't we do that? I think just so we
check that box.
Can all be sure we talked about everything that we could think of.
Great. And Nate, I don't know if you have it put up? I can pull up
Oh.
your email, I'm sure, if needed.
We should have it. I'm sorry, I was doing two things at once.
Oh, there you go.
I
Okay.
can just share the decision. So, this is a site plan review and a special permit from 2018. The decision, the conditions and findings are essentially the same. The conditions are the same between the permits, and so I'll share my screen. It's what's on the what's in the packet.
Mhm.
And as far as the management plan goes, everything's staying the same as was originally approved. Republic Services is going to be responsible for trash. I think it might have been USA Waste before. And Curb to Curb is going to do landscaping and snow removal instead of whoever Barry had. And those are just folks that Cayman's works with on behalf of Coles when they're running a property.
So, here are the first 7 conditions. So this is condition 3 that we're satisfying. I don't think there's really any change to the management plan for condition 2. 4 says a sign plan shall be submitted to the board. I'm not, not sure. I'm not even sure there's any signs really.
So Nate, is a new management plan required that has different names?
There is one that was submitted.
Okay. Good.
It's follows the rental property bylaw. I don't like, as far as I know, I asked the inspection services and they didn't think of anything, any issues with this property. So, for instance, this would have been a time like, oh, there was a few conditions here that really are outstanding and I didn't hear of anything. So,
Okay.
Yeah, and to that, I mean, we did the same analysis. I asked Barry, I asked Gail. I went through those ones that that Nate, you had identified, and I think on this side, same thing, right? If there was going to be an issue, it would have been identified. I think this was one of those properties that they volunteered to go through that rental registration as one of those test cases. I mean, I think folks know Barry's relationship with the town and inspection services, and so he was happy to submit this property, and it was inspected. So it's already been through all of those processes. It's really a nice, quiet property on University Drive, kind of tucked away, well-managed, sufficient parking. And I suspect it to stay the same.
I guess the only one, Tom, is 11 says the office space. It's a small office space as a mixed-use building. It was before any other requirements in terms of size. Is not to be used as just the management office for this building, but I think that's the case, right?
How is it used at the moment?
I don't believe it's occupied at the moment, but I know that Barry, I mean, they have their offices across the street at 2535 University Drive. I don't think there's any chance that they could fit into this office. And so when I've talked to Cinda and Pat, we've called out that condition, right? That, and not that I would think Cayman's would use it, because he's right around the corner. But just to make it clear that it's not for on-site management. It has to be open and available to the public.
Okay.
All the affordable unit conditions have been complied with. That was something that we had to verify for the sale. There's a lot of those. And then the rest are like really related to construction and issuance before a building permit. So, all these were, construction logistics plan, all these things. So as far as I know, this has all been complied with. So I don't really have any other concerns really.
All right, Jared?
Thank you, and welcome back, Tom. Does the property manager have experience complying with the inclusionary zoning 80% AMI requirements? I've heard that those units are often left vacant or that it can be difficult to comply sometimes. So I'm curious, does the property manager have experience with that, and or do they have any concerns about being able to fill those units?
Great question. So I'll say historically at this site, there's 4 affordable units. I think that there's only been like 1 tenant of those who has changed since the building's first occupancy. And it was
Okay.
because they, how do you say it? Incomed out, right?
Yeah,
their
right.
income level went so high that they didn't qualify anymore. So the folks in there have been in there. That said, Cayman's does have experience. And I think what I talked to Pat, he's used SEB Housing, who I suspect you folks are familiar with, but that's who, I think even Gail will talk to Catherine over at SEB to move some things along. So that's who Pat uses. But this is a pretty good property because it's already set up. It's got 4 units, and I think one of them's through the maybe Greenfield Housing Authority and one's through Amherst Housing Authority. So the way that, a little bit more information, Barry runs his properties, it's not necessarily the 80% threshold. He usually does it at voucher, just to make sure. He'd rather have occupancy than vacancy. And so I think that's what folks have here. And now that the folks are in there, to get them out is difficult. And I would suggest probably perilous if they were going to try to do something like that.
Right. Okay. Okay, great. Thank you.
And so those, all 4 units are occupied?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'll just jump in that. Yeah, they're on the subsidized housing inventory for the town, so the SHI. And I think we actually amended the regulatory agreement to say that the income limit is to the payment standard, a voucher payment standard. So as opposed to a strict 80%, Barry and his team was willing to write that in. So it was, right. So the units could get occupied. And so, so those units have been occupied, and Cayman's has had experience with other affordable units. So they manage presidential and other properties in town. So, they're familiar with the annual reporting and other requirements. So, whether or not they do it themselves, like Tom said, they know how, what resources to use if they need to do income verification. So, yeah.
Good. Angus.
Yeah, I have another question that's not germane to this particular application, but it's an opportunity since we're getting a chance to check in with you several years after this project has gone up. I guess I'm curious, do y'all have a sense of whether it's mostly being rented to students or if it's being rented to non-student residents of the town?
Great question. So it is not primarily to students. I want to say it might be either 50-50 or even, let's say, 60-40 with it swinging towards non-students. We had a meeting with building commissioner and assistant building commissioner a while ago and shared some of that data with them. Just that what we see practically is almost more non-students than students, or at least so like 180 Fearing Street, which is Fearing Sunset, so-called. It's duplexes and apartments right by the university. It's probably that same mix where you have like retirees, families, and students all living together, which is a little bit almost counterintuitive because you're right next to the university. You would expect it to be students, and it's not. And I think it's a function of the market. And I'll go through like infrastructure, like what's the bedroom? Is it Bed Bath parity or not? Where's the location? Are there amenities? Are they not? And then it's marketing and just leasing, right? It's having those conversations with people. And I know that, at least I'll speak directly for, Barry's group. They've done a really good job. He owns or runs several of these, and he has a mix, and I don't know that any of them are 100% students. In fact, they're probably closer to that 60-40, 50-50, which is a good mix. So yeah, this one especially, I know we've had, Amherst College athletic coaches, we've had professionals who work, Coca-Cola, we've had affordable, we've had football players, we've had other students. So it really is a good mix. So yeah, it's certainly not only students.
Thanks. That's helpful for us to understand. That was it. Thank you.
Tom, on that note, do you happen to know the unit mix, or what? Is it mostly like 1 and 2 bedrooms?
Yeah, I want to say it's a majority. It's like maybe 3 bedrooms, like 18 twos, ones, and then like the balance of ones with 4 studios. So like something like that. So let's take 7 out of the 36. So out of 29, maybe it's like 18 twos and 11 ones. So I think 1s and 2 heavy, a few
Yeah.
threes and a few studios was the mix that was there.
So there's none of the sort of 4-bedroom, 4-bath
That's right.
units like Archipelago's building.
Correct. And, you know, even when you go to 180 Fearing, and I know we're kind of blending into the housing discussion anyway, I don't think there's any bed bath parity, if you will, right? Where you have a bed with a bathroom, which are traditionally indicative of student housing. So even the 5 University Drive project across the street, essentially from where we're talking about, those are 4-bed, 2-bath at the maximum. And so, you know, to build an additional bedroom isn't that expensive, comparatively speaking. And whether it's rented to 4 people or to you know, a family with a child and have an office, so you have some flexibility versus sticking a bedroom, and not to say that there's not a place for that, right? But so far we haven't seen the need to do that, and like a 4-bed 2-bath is a nice mix because it's family or graduate or professional or student.
Okay, Jared.
I'm gonna follow Angus's lead and ask a question that's like barely germane, but because we have you, I'd love to pick your brain. And if you want to plead the fifth and have some other, want to think about this
Should we
and
just
discuss later.
put Tom on the agenda for every meeting that he
Yeah, right.
It's
Yeah.
time to pick Tom's brain.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm curious, so far Barry is the only developer who's taken advantage of the University Drive overlay. I'm curious, do you have any reflections on your experience with this property at 70 University Drive versus what's happening at the property across the street and down the street?
Yeah, and maybe I'll answer it not as directly, but I think we'll still get there. So, you know, the property we're talking about now was ahead of its time. You know, it was done, I remember working with like the previous owner, or there was a previous student housing developer, and we went through a zoning change because this was in, I mean, maybe, I don't think it was BL, it might have been office park. And so we had to change the zoning, and then there was the restriction. So it took a lot for us to get there, but I think people started to buy into, hey, this is a pretty good place for housing, you know, planning department included. And so this is, you know, 2000, we must have gone through permitting in, what is it, 2016, 27, maybe 2017, 2018, 2019. And so it was ahead of its time. Now what you folks have done with the overlay, I think is incredible. There are owners who own on the west side who I think might think they recognize a perceived value, I don't know how else to say that, of their property. And so actually loosening those up is going to be only upon like the right mix of maybe time and money. I can tell you that there are other people investigating University Drive for additional housing. Like this is, you know, and not knowing, you know, kind of stepping back, the council is changing. Anytime there's change, there's usually delay, right? Nobody really jumps in and says, let's make all these changes. And now not knowing the constitution of the council or, you know, how they're really going to work together. University Drive, thanks to you folks, and to the council, but thanks to you folks, is kind of the prime area, I would say, in town, appropriately so, right? When we think back to 5 University Drive, it was maybe 2 hearings with the planning board for a 6-story building, maybe 2 hearings with the Conservation Commission, you know, for that site. And so it really is, I think the town has spoken, an appropriate place to put this sort of dense housing. And so I would suspect over the next, let's say, you know, 6 months to 4 years, 5 years, you're going to see some changes down here. It probably will. Like, I don't see Big Y, anything down there that's just, it's kind of too much of a lift. And I think you did a good job of restricting what could go there. But I could see, as I'm looking at the map right now, you know, wetlands are a little bit of an issue, but I could see some other things shaking free and having some more of that mixed use 6-story dense housing in that area. And so kind of my reflection on 70 University Drive is it's before its time. It's a great property. It doesn't bother anybody. It doesn't have the density that some of these other will, but it's a really nice, well-run property.
Right. Great. All right. Well, so what I'm hearing is that the overlay did its job in making the development process for mixed-use denser housing there easier. And you've given at least me some additional context as to why we haven't seen more folks take advantage of it just yet.
And the thing is, like, I know you folks are talking about, North Amherst and allowing denser development up in certain already existing apartment places. Down here, even talking to the building commissioner and assistant building commissioner, Dave Waskevich, I'm not sure what his role, with all due respect, I know he's right there with Rob. So, we've talked about some existing properties that are expensive to acquire, but would make sense to acquire and to take down and to build based upon this increased density that you're giving. And so I think, not to opine on North Amherst, because I think it might be just a different animal from my travels. That does make this attractive down here. And even though some of the numbers are high, they can somewhat justifiably be high. I think it's an uncertain time in development, given what's happening at the federal level with tariffs and interest rate. Like, what happens with the head of the Fed next year? Do interest rates plummet or not? And what happens with international students at the university, and what's happening with the public-private partnership at the university? And are they going to be developing things on campus which would supplant? I have a personal belief, but are developers kind of saying, well, developers are naturally risk takers, but they're calculated risks, right? And so I think they're waiting for some of those things to settle down. But I can tell you, I have had conversations with out-of-town national developers about University Drive because they have had some interest in it. Nothing's shaken loose yet, but again, I think it's a matter of time and money.
Nate?
Yeah, I was gonna say, Jared, too, with this property, and University Drive, there's a lot of wetlands, and so, if you look, you're like, wow, that's kind of a funny shape. It was some of it was the land use constraints on the property. I think what might be worthwhile is that there's a fair amount of parking, and from what I've heard, that it's not maybe only half of it is actually necessary. And so again, with the overlay, without being prescriptive on some of those amenities, it allows for a building size to be commensurate with what you think the parking demand would be. So you could have more units given the site constraints, right? So instead of having the need for more parking limits the size of the number of units, it's a different equation. So yeah, but this was like a predecessor to zoning changes and other things. We hadn't established a mixed use building standard yet, so the mixed use portion is really small. And honestly, it's it speaks to the sometimes to my thought is like, well, we don't allow apartments with more than 20 units in a building, but maybe this would have just been a better apartment building, but our zoning doesn't allow it. And so they did a mixed use building. And at the time you could just do, a 200-300 square foot space and call it the commercial space and get a mixed use building. But then we still have parking requirements. And so then you're like, well, given the wetlands, here's what I can do. If I need 1.5 spaces per unit, if that's what I think I can get a waiver for down from 2, then I get, 30 units. But maybe today with the overlay, if someone came in fresh, they said, wow, this would be a 50 unit or a 60 unit property, not, a 36. But that's.
Yeah, and it's a 3-story building, right? So right away you could get additional height. And so if you're, averaging, 12,000 square feet per floor, and you've got, let's say, 12 units per floor, and now additional 3 floors, you're at a 72 unit building right away, and maybe 120 beds versus 36 units and 60 beds. So, your density allowance down here, I think it's going to make a difference. And so, I think you can envision this being something different, right? There is like the Slobody buildings on the left side, the west side. I think, right now Jones Library's in one, and the old was going to be a marijuana, maybe a bank, and then a marijuana facility, and now it's just really, I think, vacant. Those are somewhat ripe, but that's probably further down the road. Then you go just north of that, and there's a vacant lot just north of that is a property that's fully leased, which, it's I think it's the Newell building, as Dave Zomick calls it.
The one with Athena's and the
Precisely, yeah.
and the bicycle exchange.
which is, that's a developable piece, but again, time is not right. And then Mass Alternative Care right north of that, small parcel, don't know much what you could do there, something. And then obviously 5 University Drive north of that. So, you know, that side, I think we just went through, and that to me is time. And then the other side is probably more, it may be time and money, but you know, that might be sooner money. So we'll see. But yes, you did a great job. We'll see what
And-
everybody says once the first 6-story building's up. But if I have to get permitting done, maybe I'll be able to do it before it's all the way up.
And your mention of the council changing did not directly relate to University Drive, correct? It related
Correct.
to what else might be done in with
Precisely.
zoning.
Precisely, is just, you know, as developers, right? So I sit with Barry and I have a conversation with him, and he has other properties in other parts of the town, which, you know, maybe he can get a 3-story building, maybe he can get a 2-story building, maybe, you know, in downtown, maybe he can go up, but then is he displacing businesses? And so, you know, this is all part of the calculus that he'll do. And so, you know, when he looks, he says, all right, well, I would need a zone change to make it make sense. And my point of the council changing is, you know, that's not going to happen quickly. I mean, we saw how long the University Drive took, despite it being, I think, what we thought was a really common sense approach. If that's how long something commonsensical takes, you know, how long may some of the other stuff take, especially if a council's trying to figure out how to do their first budget and fitting in with each other to figure out what priorities they want to have. So I come back to just timing generally, and this is, you know, half a loaf is better than no loaf, I'd say. And this is a good loaf to have.
Right. Any more questions? All right.
Germane or not, I suppose.
Yeah, well, thanks for sticking around.
Happy to do it.
So are we all set with 70 University Drive?
Yeah, I was going to bring us back to that. So if there's any,
Yeah, what, do we need to vote or just,
I mean, I think a vote. I think it'd be helpful just to say that, you know, that condition, you know, 3 was
condition
satisfied.
3 is, we consider it met and no objections to the change in ownership. Bruce,
So moved.
Angus,
Second.
all right. Anybody want to talk about that more? We have one member of the public who's still with us. Maybe that person might want to make a comment, but maybe not. Just give an opportunity here.
I think
All
Sarah's
right.
for the housing costs.
All right, I don't see any hands. We'll go ahead and vote. All right, so we have a motion to approve, or let's see, to consider that condition 3 of the original conditions has been met, and that we don't have any objection to the change in ownership. All right, starting with you, Bruce.
Aye.
Fred,
Aye.
Angus,
Aye.
Jara,
Aye.
and I'm an aye. That's 5 in favor. Two absences. The motion carries. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Good night.
Good night.
All right, so we'll go back to general housing discussion if we haven't already done that. Nate, how did you envision, where did you think we were going to wander on this in this item?
Yeah, you know, I was going to announce that the council voted to approve the housing production plan. And so, you know, there was a lot, you know, a fair amount of discussion with the CRC and then with the council about possible changes to some of the kind of language of the plan. And that didn't move forward. So it really was the plan that the planning board reviewed back, you know, this summer. So, you know, so the plan is approved. We'll, you know, locally we'll send it to the state. You know, I'm confident that they'll approve it. So, in the packet, I had just shown the implementation matrix from the housing production plan and then the zoning priorities list that's been developed by the housing and zoning subcommittee and staff. And, I think in the next, the new planning and economic development director, Jeff, will come in January. And I think we're, staff, we're talking a little bit more about really what, how to prioritize some of the things from the housing production plan. Some of the things on the list, that staff want to work on aren't necessarily housing related. I think it would be important to have a meeting with the planning board and the housing trust, maybe the first meeting in February, and maybe with the CRC to say, okay, what do we take from the housing production plan and what do we try to move forward? So it's kind of like just, a bigger kind of broader discussion. Some of it is kind of like what Tom said. I agree that it can take a lot of time to get things, from an idea to a zoning amendment to through council and be adopted. And so I think I've mentioned this a little bit. I'd like to have, anywhere from 4 to 7 zoning amendments teed up for, spring to be brought forward to town council for their consideration and referral as as zoning amendments. I don't know if they would move all of them forward, but, kind of looking at that list and what's in the housing production plan, what the housing and zoning subcommittee is working on, like, okay, can we set ourselves some timelines and work on it and kind of keep momentum. And so some of it is, one, we really haven't had too much zoning change in the last year and a half. If we, I think University Drive's a nice one, but there weren't a lot of other zoning changes. If we bring a few things in the spring, my hope is that they get adopted by a year from now. So, we're looking, okay, let's get these things working, knowing that they might not be effective, for at least a year, right? They're not actually going to be a zoning bylaw, it could be longer, 18 months. And so, kind of saying what do we think is worthwhile? What's, what are we going to pursue? The housing and zoning subcommittees really said, North Amherst is still a priority, looking at maybe some changes to the village center zoning, and then, it's in combination with a few things. Staff, there's a list. I think there's a few that we already have work that are being worked on. I'd like to have a few more. East Amherst, like I mentioned, we have a grant for $70,000 to study and assess the zoning in East Amherst, and then come up with what we think is a zoning changes. And I think one's looking at a 40R overlay. What the grant doesn't decide is what's the extent and geographic area of the study and what are we looking at. So that's something that the planning board will also be a part of with staff, early next year. It can be about a 12 to 15 month process with a consultant to do this. So yeah, there's just kind of there'll end up being a lot happening. I just want to make sure we're, the planning board provides direction to the housing zoning subcommittee if it wants, and everyone understands kind of what everyone's working on. And now would be the time to say, oh, actually, I've been thinking about some other things. We can add it to the priority list. We can move things around on the list. That's all.
What about the housing, the downtown design standards? When do you think those are going to drop?
Yeah, staff's meeting with Dodson in the next week or two. I think they'll be made public in early next year, and then they'll be shopped around to boards and committees. And so I was thinking it'd get to the planning board in either late January or February of next year. It'd also go to like design review board, historical commission, CRC, commissions for persons with disabilities. And the idea is that I would get to the planning board twice and different boards a few times. And so, I forget what it's a flexible deadline, but I think the idea is to say have them be finalized by the end of, say by June. I think it was even by May 1. I'm not sure, but we can say by June. Right. And from that,
some of the proposals in that are substantial, they're significant enough that I suspect that that proposal is going to suck all the air out of the room, and make it hard to really focus on anything else.
Yeah.
And not that I don't admire your ambition, but how many balls, and particularly a ball of that size, can we juggle at once?
Right. And so, for the planning board, Bruce is familiar with the standards. He's been part of a working group with Doug and, a number of other stakeholders in town. the Dodson and Flinker looked at downtown, and they've kind of divided it into a few different kind of sub districts, and each district has their own standards, which end up being both changes to our dimensional standards, and then maybe even like a whole new overlay zone for parts of downtown. And I think what isn't clear is even once the standards are complete, what do we do with them? And so I think they seem really great. I haven't looked at them. I don't know, say the details, right? But the idea of them is nice. I agree with Doug. It could be like a year process then of saying, well, do we just take exactly what they've given us and try to change zoning? Or how do we sit with it and tweak it and then move it forward? But I do think it will be a bit of a process. I think, for instance, like, do people like the idea of more density on the west side of Kendrick Park? Do they like having different setbacks in the downtown? And the idea is to all have a more vibrant streetscape. So really what the idea is like, okay, right now in our BG district, we have, essentially 0 setback. And they might be saying, well, we need 5 feet, we need 10 feet. And so we'd have to change our dimensional table and our zoning bylaw in a bunch of places to get the standards to work. I think I agree, Doug, it's a heavy lift, but it's something that I would still like to have, the 4 to 7 this spring,
Okay.
knowing that come
All right.
fall, we'd be pushing the design standards changes.
Okay. Angus and then Jara.
Yeah, I was just going to say I would like to second what Nate is suggesting. I think the design standards are going to take a while, and I think that they should be a priority for the planning board. But it just sounds like there's going to be a lot of stakeholders weighing in and a lot of iterations and changes. And I would love it if they were ready to go by May 1st, but I think that's an ambitious timeline for the design standards. But I do take your point, Doug, and I think in the housing subcommittee we should probably chat about which 2 or 3 things we really want to prioritize. The North Amherst overlay is clearly one. I think looking at something like village centers could be another option. Looking at, along with Nate, Nate's, consultant, the East Amherst stuff would be great.
I think, yeah.
And then, maybe one other thing would be good. And that would also give us some distribution around town with different types of housing that we're looking at. And it would align, I think, with several of the these priorities in the housing production plan.
Good. Jara.
I just wanted to second Nate's ambition, and I think it's a great idea to try and get a couple things packaged through this spring. And saying it with a 3-month-old baby, would love to support as much as I can outside of these meetings. And to that extent, I would say I would advocate for the 40R and 40Y overlays being part of that package, seeing as one accomplishes affordable rental housing and one looks at more starter home ownership opportunities. So I think pairing those 2 things would be, and they're also looking at different kinds of zones and areas. So I think those would be ones that I would advocate strongly for being a part of that package.
Great.
Yeah, sorry if I just jump in. Some of it would be if we meet with the trust too, would they be willing to do some research to help support the planning board? I think the housing trust is also eager to move some things along from the housing production plan. And so, whether it's the first meeting in February or maybe the last one in January, but having some time, in the next few meetings to do that, just to see what they're thinking about as well. And so, the housing production plan, for instance, it says increased density, right, in say in certain neighborhoods. It doesn't give, in the plan, it might have a little bit more direction, but it doesn't have a lot.
Yeah.
So now it's like, well, you can probably get there many different ways. Is it, changing the allowance for townhouses and duplexes? Is it redefining triplexes, or is it reducing, having a new formula just for density overall in terms of like reducing lot area per family? So it's those kinds of things that, become difficult to kind of ferret out and then move forward. You know, for staff, for instance, we're looking at the limited site plan review for protected uses and also having different criteria to allow more things to be administratively approved and having less site plan review hearings with the planning board. You know, so the Amherst College one is interesting. It's a new building. It needs a building permit. That would probably still go to a hearing. But what if, for instance, the salt shed didn't need a building permit, so it was under 200 square feet, and they weren't doing any other changes to the property? I think that could have been handled administratively. But right now, any new accessory structure has to be brought to the planning board for a full hearing. So Amherst Soccer came earlier this year to put a prefab storage shed, and I think that could have been handled administratively. The idea is we're going through what other towns do, what our previous permit conditions are, and then saying, okay, how can we make regulations to get to where we were through the hearing? So what kind of conditions did we have? What are the thresholds? Allowing more than one principal dwelling on a property is something we're looking at changing. So we don't allow that right now. It's not very clear. Doesn't, and so the concern is, is it allowing a single family home plus a duplex plus an apartment, or do we define that? So it's something we're looking at. We have temporary uses, I think I mentioned, so allowing, a farm to be used for venues, frequently. I think changing PRP zoning is really interesting. So, it's been discussed at the Housing and Zoning Subcommittee. We have professional research park areas in town. And the idea would be, could we allow housing or put overlays on them to allow a few other uses other than just what's allowed in the PRP now? Something that staff would like to move forward. One thing that will be coming, and it's from the state, is the state just came up with new clean energy siting. So they came up with a whole new set of regulations. A community has to have it in place a little less than a year from now. So, and it has to have new zoning and regulations for, I think it's both solar, wind and maybe hydro. I don't know, maybe it's just solar, but I think it was for a few that essentially these have to get permitted from initial land use permits to building permit all within a year. So essentially they created like a comprehensive permit for clean energy. And the CRC has been working on the solar bylaw for a long time now in town. It's 25 pages, and now it's gonna, staff will look at it, and so in this next few months, that'll become a big one that the planning department will be working on with staff. So we have to get something hopefully adopted by like November 1 of next year to deal with solar and other clean energy facilities, and it's everywhere from small to large. There's a lot going on. But, if anyone's interested, that's something. So there's like, those are 4 right there that staff are trying to, keep moving.
All right. Anything else, Nate, you wanted to discuss tonight?
No, I mean, I think just, for the board, just, you can look at the matrix from the housing production plan, our zoning list, and you can always email staff individually or have questions. And I think, we'll keep this on the agenda. And I think, in January, I think it'd be great to focus. The Housing and Zoning Subcommittee already has. I think North Amherst, I mentioned at the Housing Subcommittee, I think there's not as much enthusiasm for it as University Drive, just given, its location. I think it's still, if you look at town-wide, it's actually an appropriate place. And so just getting that right will, could take a lot of work. At the same time, we have a framework already. I said I'd try to get more language to it, and I think we should just try to just say, okay, let's give ourselves a deadline, right? By April 1, we'll have a draft of this overlay, and it might not be perfect, but it's something that can then be referred. It'll be referred. The idea is if council thinks it's good enough, they'll refer it back to the planning board and CRC for more discussion. So it's really just getting it in a form we think is good enough to be referred. Yeah, and so
Well, I'm happy to set a deadline for April 1st, but you've got to do most of the work. So, well,
that's all right.
I mean, I feel like if we had 2 or 3 that are sort of
right,
substantive, dimensional, or geographic proposals,
Mhm.
and then some of the other sort of procedural ones would be okay. But to have more than a few proposals that are going to be the ones that are controversial, you know, is just kind of not a recipe for success. So that's me. I mean, I'm just a little more cautious, I guess, than some of the rest of you.
Yeah, the Housing and Zoning Subcommittee thought, if there's North Amherst, it'd be great to have one other geographic area, right? So really, it's it's not like the council or the community can say, oh, we're really singling out North Amherst. It's like, look, we're trying to propose something in North Amherst and somewhere else.
Well, since you've got the consultant money for East Amherst, I mean, wouldn't that be the number 2?
Yeah, I just don't think it'd be ready this spring. So
Oh, really?
Right. So we don't even have a contract signed yet. The grant was just awarded.
Okay. All right. Bruce.
I've been influenced, I think, by the conversations that have been going on in the press and with Kitty and with Darcy with the petitions that were lodged, the people that were speaking to that. I went to an Amherst Community Land Trust meeting. I ran into a guy named Rolf Karlstrom, his page. Anyway, they live on Fearing. And I got an interesting earful from Rolf. And as I had my attention turned back to the research that I started doing 3 years ago, looking for towns like Amherst, and have dealt a little bit more with that, not a lot, but beginning to, it's becoming increasingly apparent to me that we should challenge ourselves and others to, firstly, to say why, or is there another town in the country that is more challenged by the ratio of the population of the town to the size of the institution, and factored in with the amount of the proportion of off and on-campus students that institution hosts or doesn't. And it seems to me that Amherst is unique, and it's becoming more apparent to me that of the 3 options that I articulated years ago, or to myself anyway, and maybe others, that there are the housing can be provided on campus by the university. It can be provided off campus with the existing housing in small scale distributed through the town, all trying to diminish the adverse effects of transitory residents in too greater concentrations. Or 3, we can do what we're trying to do with the overlays, which is to recognize that we need to concentrate student occupancy in a particular part of town near campus. So those 3. I had discounted the first of those, the expectation that the university would increase its provision of on-campus housing, because I was, I guess, lulled by the proposition that it already houses more students than many of similar institutions around the country. But when we put that together with that we are a unique situation, it seems to me that we can and should be thinking about, we can and should be making a stronger, better, more persistent case to the university, to the administration, that they should do better, and that some fraction of this 9,000 housing that we need should be on campus. We should raise the bar on that. I guess I've also just finished a biography of Samuel Adams, who I knew something about before and now know a lot more about. And here's a guy who was relentless in his advocacy for a certain proposition, and was very, very clever and strategic about the way he went about it for 10 years or more. And I've become somewhat inspired by Mr. Adams's success on a much more difficult challenge than what we've got here. But I think that we should seriously shift our strategic objective to expecting that we should persuade the university to increase the amount of on-campus housing because there does seem to be places to put it and so forth. I think there's a conversation there because there are two big downsides to that. One is that if it's on campus, we don't get the tax revenue, and if it's on campus, we don't get the affordable housing fraction. So there are two considerable losses. And I think we should be thinking about how to weigh that. And I certainly think that I haven't been putting enough of my mental energy into deliberating on that particular solution concept to the housing and therefore specifically the student housing part of our town's housing need. Anyway, I've written a 4-pager on this, and I don't know whether it's a preamble to the overlay thing, which I said that I would do, or whether it's an opinion piece that could be published and be the basis for an advocacy. I know when I was successful in creating the first co-housing community in town, it started with a couple of pretty well-received and op-ed pieces in the bulletin, which got the horse out of the stable. And I think I'm beginning to think that that some effort should be put in that direction.
All right, Bruce. Angus, I see your hand. I guess, Bruce, I'll just say, it's never been clear what kind of leverage the town has with the university, to me. You know, I've been involved in housing discussions kind of on both sides of the fence for a while. And, you know, I think it's just unclear to me how Paul Bockelman can say to the chancellor of UMass, you need to do more, and have it have any teeth. I think until the university recognizes that it's in their, you know, somehow it's in their best interest, I just don't know how you can compel that, I guess is all I'll say.
Well, I know you can't compel it. That's exactly the point. One has to be persuasive. And that's the point of the Adams example, which just happens to be the most recent one in my head.
Okay.
But I've spent a lot of my life persuading organizations in various countries to do things that they didn't think they wanted to do or didn't know they should do.
Okay.
And I haven't always been successful, but I've had a fairly remarkable level of success actually with the organizations that I've either started or participated in. So I wouldn't give up on it. But back to your point, I too don't know. I think that it's precisely that fact, Doug, that we perhaps don't really know what leverage we have. That I mean, if we knew we didn't have any, if we absolutely knew that that we could not be persuasive, but I don't know that that's true, and I'd like to spend some time thinking about how the town could be more persuasive. And it starts in my head with the recognition that we are unique, and maybe we're not, but so far I haven't been able to find another town in the country that's more challenged in this respect than this town. Not one town in the country. And that should stand for something in terms of being persuasive, and then figuring out how to get allies to also join in the argument or the case, making the case. And making the case, as you say, as to why it's in the university's best interest. I think there's a case, I think we can think about that too. But I'd like to put some effort into that at some point, because it seems to me that that's a solution concept that perhaps we had let slip more than we should. That's a kind of a late 25 realization that I may or may not entertain into 26.
All right, Angus and then Jara.
Yeah, I have a quick question and then I have a response. The question is, did the planning board in past years have a meeting with UMass representatives?
Yes.
And did anything come of that meeting? Was there anything useful that happened with that? Do we feel like there was kind of momentum in anyway?
Well, I mean, I can say that the meeting was with a couple of the senior people in university relations. And so they had come prepared with some of the sort of facts around housing so that people, weren't throwing around numbers that were inaccurate. Bruce, were you in that meeting?
Yes, I was. I was going to say the same thing. We
Yeah,
got
I
useful
don't
data.
remember any, they weren't the sort of folks who could make a commitment or, on the behalf of the university.
Not even close. And I think the town manager has made it clear to us as a board that he doesn't want any intrusion into a conduit between the town and the university that doesn't go right through his office.
That's right.
And I can maybe understand that. I probably can understand that, but I don't think I'm fully satisfied that I don't know enough about what's going through that conduit. Therefore, I'm not inclined to trust that everything possible is being rammed down that pipe.
Okay, that's helpful to hear. And I should add, I just finished a biography on James Madison, so I'm also thinking about some of these people. And Madison was a little bit less strident than Samuel Adams, so maybe I'll take a slightly softer stance. I mean, it sounds to me, based on hearing that it could be useful for us to have a meeting with the town manager to get a sense of his strategy. I'm just looking at the housing production plan. Under section D, the second strategy listed is continue to strengthen town-gown relationships and update strategic agreements with academic partners to invest in community services. And the lead responsibility is town manager and planning department, which sounds like what y'all are saying. But it sounds like it might be useful for us to chat with the town manager to get a sense of what he's saying to UMass, what he's hearing from UMass, and for us to share that as we are necessarily making planning decisions around town housing, UMass is a key part of that, even though it's not under our purview. But then I guess to counter some of that, I'll just also say I think I share, Bruce, your worries about losing property tax revenue. As someone who studies school finance, that's a major concern of mine. If UMass ends up housing a lot of these students, then it's a drag on a number of costs for the town without commensurate payments, unless UMass agrees to pilots, and I don't think they're going to do that either. But I do think they have to be part of the conversation. They should be. The other thing that I was going to say, or the other thing that I'm thinking about, is that the conversation around UMass providing the housing, sometimes the feeling that I get from people across town is that there's some kind of confusing narratives there. I mean, for instance, I've heard people say, that the town the town services can't handle building additional housing. UMass should build it, which seems confusing to me, because a lot of those services, regardless of whether UMass builds it, the sewage impact is going to be the same whether UMass builds it or somewhere outside of UMass property housing is built. So there are some things that I think are really important points that we should be thinking about, but then there's also some, I guess, talking points that I've heard around pushing UMass to provide housing that feel incorrect and that I don't want to reinforce, which you're not saying, Bruce, but just some of the things that I'm thinking about as we think about how to bring UMass more into this conversation.
All right, Angus. I guess one thing's come to mind that I'm going to just interject for a moment. Tom Reedy mentioned earlier the university's public-private partnership initiative that is sort of public, and I don't know exactly what's going on at the moment, but I have heard one of the university relations folks say in a public meeting that the objective of that is to renew the housing that the university has now. it's not explicitly to expand the housing. So, if they have 13,000 beds, a lot of them were built in the 70s or the 60s. They want to renew those or replace them, but not necessarily expand beyond the current capacity on campus. So, I think that's one of the things, Angus, that people might be a little confused about, that, oh, university has this big P3 project and it's going to expand housing. Not necessarily. All right, Jara and then Fred.
I just want to reiterate all the comments made about the importance of figuring out a more sustainable partnership between this town and the university as it relates to like coordinating housing strategy. One of the things that really is like disappointing for me to hear when I'm having conversations with folks about housing, and as it particularly relates to UMass, is like it invariably always goes down to well, the town can't do anything. We don't have any leverage or anything like that. And this is not like a reflection on any of the members who have made that comment tonight. But the fact is that it always goes to that. And I wish that the conversation was more about how we can work together and not like how can we pull one over on the other guy to get them to do what we want. Because my day-to-day job is like looking at local housing environments, looking at housing markets and stakeholders, and recognizing that this housing crisis that we're in is not going to be solved by any one entity whatsoever. We all need to work together to find solutions, and we all have assets that we can bring to the table. And so it's just really frustrating for me to hear and learn that there aren't any kind of regular conversations between the town and the university about addressing this critical resource that our community needs, and that we're both talking about figuring out how to find solutions for, but we're not talking about it together. Like if I was a hired consultant working for the town of Amherst, I would be like, you guys are nuts. Why are you not talking to UMass right now? And
Well,
I know there's a
think
lot more
the
complicated things. And
conversations are happening with Paul, with the town manager.
yeah, well, I guess I don't know that to be the case. I'm a planning board member and I don't know that to be the case. If it is, I would love to know what those conversations were about. I would love to know so that I could make my recommendations on what we pursue for the housing production plan are complementary and not contradictory to what UMass or Amherst College or Hampshire College might be doing. Like right now, we're just making a lot of decisions in this vacuum and pretending like this ginormous gorilla doesn't live across the street from us. Like we need to talk to them about what we're doing so that we can all work together. I'm going to stop myself because I'm now getting on a soapbox and just ranting. But I would implore us, and to the degree that we can, to have some more vocal and transparent leadership on what we are doing together to solve housing in this community. And I'll stop there.
Okay. Nate, I hope you're taking notes.
Yeah.
And this
no,
is not a slight on town staff by any, like, I want to make
No,
that
I'm just thinking,
abundantly clear.
I mean,
Okay.
we need to engage with the town manager, and Nate would be the conduit for us to do that.
Yeah, no, I think, and so Jerry, some of the background is when we had done talking about University Drive, it was like, well, if we can say we have 1,000 beds there, it was referenced in a U3 report from the town gown committee a number of years ago, and it was like, okay, maybe with another one, it's like, here are some things we can bring to UMass and say, well, what else could you do? And so, Doug, hearing you, and I know about the P3, I know it was really about looking at what, how can you maintain the beds on campus, but it's like, my idea was always like, if we can get 1,000 or 1,200 beds on University Drive, if the university with this P3 would add 1,000 beds on their campus, we get a little bit more in North Amherst. If we can talk to Hadley, and all of a sudden there's like 4,000 more beds than we have now, that's a really big deal that we're not going to get otherwise. And so, I feel like the conversations are, I feel like a lot of things are happening, and we should make sure that that is part of the conversation with UMass. So I made a note. I do think it's really important that, if they're going to be rebuilding or possibly renovating Southwest Towers or doing some major housing overhaul, is adding, some beds here, some beds there, whether or not it's 1,000, whatever, but having some incremental change, I feel like could be part of that, right? Because they're going to be spending millions of dollars. Like I have a feeling that someone's going to say that the Southwest Towers need to be torn down, right? Because they're so old. And if they're really going to be rebuilding new buildings, why can't you put more beds in new buildings, even if they're renovating? Anyways, so I think those are really important conversations to have. I think the citizen petitions calling out some of the data from the housing production plan. I mean, it's something that I've always thought is like, what do we want to have as a goal to have in a community in terms of vitality and population, school age children, and all these things. And so, to Bruce's point, it's like, well, if the schools aren't attractive, our professors not going to be coming to the university and colleges. What else is happening? And I think, there's it's regional, right? It's not just in Amherst; it's in all of the Northeast. But I think that it's getting to the point where after the citizen petitions, I was looking at the state allows seasonal community designation. Students don't count, but the Cape Cod and the Berkshires, if you're a seasonal community, you can have regulations about certain housing and lease terms. And at one point we said, well, could you make student communities? And I think it was like that didn't get traction at the state level, but I was trying to like, okay, are there things we could start doing to try to help, non-student households because of the imbalance in the market? And so, it's really difficult to address that, who lives where, but we've talked about having a higher inclusionary zoning. And so, right now we have, at University Drive, we talked about maybe, 20% of the units have to be affordable, but that 12 to 20, so that 8% is up to 150 AMI. And that tries to get to a different kind of household than, say, capital A affordable. And it's not, Deidre, it's not on our subsidized housing inventory, but it's just trying to get different income levels into housing. It's kind of refreshing to hear what Tom said. But yeah, I think there's, I agree. I feel like there's, especially with the new director here, maybe that's something I'll talk about too, is, I thought it was helpful to have a meeting with Tony and Nancy. So it was nice to know some of the facts, what they're thinking about in terms of housing, kind of how they do data collection, right? So for the longest time, everyone's like, UMass must know where the students are. And they were really clear. And they said, well, since COVID, the pandemic, they have much better data, from 22 moving forward. And so, to me, it's not worth arguing like, well, how many students lived off campus in 2019? It's like, okay, what can we do moving forward? And now the university has some metrics to actually to say that, and part of North Amherst overlay was also with the University Village in North Amherst. It was like they didn't do anything in terms of increasing density when they rebuilt it, and they could have. One of their concept ideas was to do basically like a back bay townhouses and have more of a gridded network of streets and have more density, but still have open space and make it more like it's a different kind of neighborhood than what's there. But it didn't happen. But I think I've heard a number of people say like, oh, that was a missed opportunity to have, again, more housing, but still have a nice site plan. Instead, they just rebuild what was there, and I think the folks like it and it's nice, but it's like what was there another opportunity that could have been had? Anyways.
All right, we'll go on to Fred.
Yeah, couple things. I was on the board at the same time that Bruce was when UMass sent the representatives in. That was when we were meeting in person in town hall, and I came away struck by the UMass very forcefully pointing out that they were housing a greater percentage of students than lots of their counterparts. And meanwhile, I was thinking back to when I was a student at UMass in the 60s, and they are presently housing a far smaller percentage of students on their campus than they were when I was a student there. So that's it's a little bit disingenuous on their part just to point to that they're somehow greater than other land grant institutions. They're not higher than what they used to be. The other thing that was clear from that meeting is that the really meaningful discussions between the town and the gown were going to take place between the manager and the chancellor. And so I think it's very important that we get the manager to take a little time and discuss this either with the full board or with the housing subcommittee, so we get a better sense of exactly what the dynamics are of those discussions going forward.
All right. Thank you, Fred. Angus.
Yeah, just two quick things. One, and I guess is just in response to what Fred was saying. We should note that at least over the last 60 years, the percentage of students that are housed on campuses all across the country has fallen a lot. So it's UMass is part of a larger trend across higher education in the United States, in particular for public universities. The same thing has happened at the University of Texas, where I went. But the other thing I was going to just point out is I think Bruce is right to be bringing this up in this capacity, and especially the language that I've been hearing from residents is really viewing students as in hostile ways. I mean, the language it's not exactly turning ugly. And I've not been here long enough to know what the conversation was like 10, 20, 30 years ago. But there really seems to be an antagonistic kind of focus on students as like a threat to the community or as a problem to be solved. And at some level, there is a problem here that we are trying to solve. I mean, it's a broader housing problem than just students, though. And I think we need to be alive to the fact that if we don't do some things, at least to reach out to the town manager in the way that we're kind of proposing, I do worry that trend is going to continue. And UMass is an enormous asset. The students are wonderful residents in many ways, and I don't want us to get to a point where we're treating this wonderful institution that has problems like any institution as a problem for the town.
Nate?
Yeah, I'd second that. So I think it's really difficult to separate out like the housing market, and then we call out different parts of the population. And so I there was a civic academy that the town hosted, and there was 20 or 25 students, and I represented the planning department, and there were students from different I don't know if UMass, but I know different college, maybe UMass students, but anyways, there were students that attended. And then we had a discussion outside, and they said, "Oh, why doesn't there was like passerbys, and they stopped, and I was talking about student housing, and someone said, why doesn't the town like us students?" And I was like, well, what do you mean? And they said, well, all I've been hearing is really anti-student. And I said, I'm really sorry about that, right? Because it's like, I think it was related to the housing, but this person was actually, I think, felt really personal about it, and it's hard to separate the person from the broader housing picture. And I said, really, I know. I said, it's a nuance, but it's really about, say, the demand, the housing demand and supply, and it's really not the student, because there's so many things that students bring to town, the university and colleges bring, that just make Amherst, right? So Amherst wouldn't be what it is without UMass, Hampshire, and Amherst, and the 5 colleges. And so, yeah, I think in the housing production plan, they said to change kind of the language and rhetoric and kind of that, and I thought it was changing. And I feel like recently in the last 6 months or a year, it's kind of shifted it back again. But I feel like we can have these conversations about housing, right, and not try to vilify certain populations, because you could, someone could start talking and complaining about seniors, right? Well, we're an aging population, so it's more about what can we do to accommodate them, right? Is it like aging in place? Is it providing different types of living facilities or different size units, right, to accommodate single individual households, rather than saying, well, so yeah, I think that's a really important piece. And so the Housing Trust has been working on that too, kind of messaging and how do we have these conversations? And so that's where I'd want to meet with them in February, because I know and unfortunately, I think one of their members left, but they were really big on this in terms of how to, be more kind of inclusive and more kind of sympathetic and have, a different kind of approach. And so I think it's a really good idea. And I think, right, I can, let the town manager and assistant town manager know if they can't come to a meeting, at least what the planning board has expressed. And, I think those are really important conversations. So I did feel bad, actually, that a few people asked me at Civic Academy, why doesn't the town like students? And I've heard people say, well, students don't support the economy. They're not here year round and all these things. And I don't, I'm not gonna, I feel like you can have a rebuttal for everything, but it's like, well, I think they do all those things. And so it's just one of those, it's a hard conversation. To me, it's more about the demand they put on housing and how it affects prices. It's not, whether it was students or some other demographic, it's like, how do we address that supply and demand issue, not who is causing
Well,
it.
I mean, I will say that I think it also has to do with the number of cars that are accumulated at student homes. I live across from a tiny little house that has at least 4 people, or if not 5. So there's always 4 or 5 cars in the driveway. And then there's up to another 5 cars from boyfriends and friends that are there, could be there 24 hours a day, but aren't constantly there. So there's a lot of vehicle traffic. And then there's the Thursday night walk into town, which they depart around 10 o'clock and then they come back anywhere from 1 to 2 o'clock, which, during the shoulder seasons when they're there and my windows are open, I hear them going both ways. So I think some of it's that kind of thing. It's the behavior and the traffic that are not typical for a single family home. So I mean, I get it. I live with it too.
Yeah, no, I agree. The parking is really interesting.
So to me, it's more than demand. I mean, when people say, you're threatening our neighborhoods, some of it is that behavior, which if it didn't exist, I think the objection to having students infiltrating the neighborhood would not be as vociferous. So what I was actually going to say was, Nate, help me with the dates, but probably 10 to 12 years ago, the then Chancellor of UMass and the town manager at the time, I guess, kind of agreed to have a kind of a joint effort of communication and discussion about a number of things, one of which was housing. And I think they called it the University Town of Amherst Collaborative. UTAC was the acronym. And around that time, I think the university helped the town, if not entirely, funded the U3 report that you referred to, which was hiring a sort of urban design firm to look at places where housing could be built, I guess is kind of how it started. And it ended up identifying 3 parcels that were owned by the university. One is that sort of vacant parcel on North Pleasant Street as you drive from, as Triangle Street goes through the roundabout and you're approaching the campus. On the right, there's that vacant parcel just after the church and across from the Hillel Center, let's say. So, and that's often been called the gateway parcel. So that was one. The second one was on Mass Ave at the south end of the main campus, where the university has just, a few years ago built that big Fieldstone complex, which I think it has 600 beds, something like that. And then the third one was over off of University Drive, kind of in some of the parking lots north of the stadium. And so, that effort ended up being, what can UMass build on its land, and not too much about what can the town do. And then out of that came the big complex that the university built with the 600 beds. So, I mean, I haven't heard people at the university say this, but I think you could say the university conducted a process with the town, some stuff was identified, and the university did something. So, what did the town do? So I think that's just another sort of part of the history, I guess is what I'll say. And, there's a new chancellor at UMass. Maybe it's time for that person and Paul to reinvigorate the UTAC process, or have a new process, whatever, and take another pass at it. And then there's one other thing I'll say. I see your hand, Fred. And I've wondered whether, I mean, I've been a little bit mystified that the level of rhetoric about students and housing has increased so much lately, and kind of wondered why. And I have a hypothesis, which you guys can tell me if you think it's got any legs or not. But a lot of the people that moved here, a lot of this UMass faculty and staff who moved here to support the huge enrollment increase of the university back in the 70s, let's say, a lot of them are dying off or moving out, moving into assisted living or moving out of town near their children or whatever. So I wondered whether, are there a lot more houses coming up for sale in the last 5 years than had been coming up for sale before? In which case, there's a lot more inventory for developers to buy and turn into student housing than had been the case in the 20 or 25 years before that, which might be why, we've had a lot more conversions, if we have, and I don't really know that. But could it be that there's sort of a generational transition happening, because we're a relatively old population of homeowners, and the ones who haven't left town are experiencing a lot of change that they haven't seen in their 30 or 40 years being here, and maybe it's a generational thing, which is providing the opportunity for the developers to come in. So that's just a hypothesis I wanted to share. Fred, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Doug. The neighborhoods are changing, and my neighborhood is certainly a case in point. I remember, 40 years ago, roughly, there were a lot of the percentage of owner occupancy was higher than it is now, and I can vividly remember my wife and I sponsoring what we called our baby Jesus birthday party, and we put out my wife put out this huge sheet cake with a gazillion candles on it, and we had children at this coming, down the street from all over, and if we did that today, we might get one or two families. There's been you're quite correct. There has been a shift, and I'm not clear the extent to which it's pressure from students, and to the extent to which there's been a generational shift. That is something that we need to think about.
All right. Thanks, Fred. Jared. I
I'll
will
just-
note it's about 20 after 9, and
I
you
know.
know, I'm hoping we're done by 10.
Yeah, I'll be quick. I think Doug, that's a very interesting theory, and I think it certainly makes sense. I think a important part of all of this, although Amherst may not be, well, enough hedging, speculation of single family homes and turning them into rentals is a growing thing nationally. It's not just something that's, happened recently in Amherst. There's a lot of different models for how you can do it, but there's a lot of really awful predatory equity firms out there who are very intentionally buying up single family homes and turning them into rental opportunities, usually doing minimal repairs, flipping them, and then charging them for as much rent as they possibly can. So I think it's an interesting point that, like, yes, the town probably grew in the 70s. A lot of homeowners are probably downsizing. And that may put more supply on the market. But I think that the case is also just that nationally, unfortunately, those who have a lot of wealth have discovered that this is a really lucrative model. And they know that not a lot of single family homes are being built right now. So that if they buy them up and turn them into rentals, they're going to be able to squeeze a lot of rental money out of them.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Nate.
Yeah, thanks, Doug. Yeah, I want to acknowledge, right, that, so, you said it was, behavior, parking, there was a bunch of things associated with, students. And I want to acknowledge that. I think, I was talking about what we're focusing on is zoning. And so I feel like, we have the
Right.
residential rental property bylaw, and we've had a few other things, in the last 10 years through inspection services, and even with the police in UMass to kind of address behavior and things. And I feel like we've been, zoning just moves a little differently. And so I feel like we kind of have to look at that now. And I feel like it's a really good time too with the new housing production plan and how we can do certain, different things with housing. So but I took notes. I feel like, we can have a few other conversations with different staff and talk about a few of those things. So, parking is really interesting. It's things we try to talk about, in zoning and general bylaw. And if it's, maybe we have to re-examine some of those standards and what that means, because, hearing what you're talking about, it's like, yeah, is there some way that we can, just have a few, is there something the town could do or have some ideas around there? And so, yeah, I think that's really important. And in terms of the rentals, I was thinking, as you're talking that, I was on vacation this summer, I was abroad, and people are saying, it was unbelievable. They're like, you wouldn't believe, right, how in the last, 5 years, how many units, say in like Madrid, are now just short-term rentals, right, or Barcelona. And I heard, from a number of people that, because of the tourists or whatever the reason was, but it was, it's totally changed the dynamics of the market there. And so, especially in Spain, I was looking at, it was, it's like the unemployment rate of under 30s high. The cost of housing is like 4 times the average wage. And, now a significant portion of the housing units in Madrid and the suburbs, like, over 30% are short-term rentals. And I am like, oh my gosh, it's like, there's like, whatever it is, like the statistics are just amazing. And I'm like, okay, so this is happening for some other reason here. Amherst has its reasons, and, probably, whatever, down in Florida will have its reasons. But I was just shocked to learn that it was happening places where, say rental units, I just have a different, historically are different, right, say in Europe than what they mean in America. But hearing people say that what they're experiencing, it's unbelievable. And some of it had to do with, right, long-term renters, families were turning over, but people see this as an investment vehicle differently than what they had, say, even 10 years ago. And it's really, I don't, it's like BlackRock, right, or all these companies. It's unbelievable. I'm not really sure how to, I don't know if you can stop it, but it's just, I just in my neighborhood, a house just sold for an unbelievable amount, and it's becoming a rental. And they're probably going to charge way too much for whoever's going to live there.
The way to stop it is to let a whole lot of housing be built so that there's not so much money to be made in single family houses.
Correct. Yes.
I
Don't
mean,
constrain
it's
the
so easy.
supply. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that would create some change in the character of Amherst.
Right. Some vacancy is a good thing. Right?
Yeah.
To have a little.
Yeah.
No, I'm, you know, yeah. I just can't believe the home prices and they sell like in 3 days. You know, it's like they have an open house. I call the realtor and they said, you know, on day 3 we're going to be closing our offers. So, you know, comes a list on Saturday. By Monday they're going to be accepting offers, and you know they get a dozen, and some are cash above asking. And it's like, how do you compete with that?
Same with the
Right.
house across the street, and they only took 2 days, not 3.
Angus.
I mean, just one other thing to say. I hear your comment, Doug, about supply, and I agree. At the same time, if we were to increase supply that dramatically, that it would have a real major impact on rents. We'd also see probably decreases in property values.
Right. Right.
At least that's normally how that happens. Which,
Yep.
you know, I think part of the problem here is that I think it's easy to vilify developers. All property owners who currently own properties benefit from the high property values from constrained supply, and from having zoning that restricts supply further. So we have a lot of economic data and research that supports that current homeowners benefit from the system quite well, and things like moratoriums also benefit current owners.
No argument. I'm guilty. Are we all homeowners on this board? We don't have a renter, do we? We have at least one landlord, maybe 2, who are, you know, just raking it in.
Jesse's a landlord. I'm a landlord. I'm not sure where else.
Well, Fred sometimes is a landlord. All right, so maybe we're at the end of that conversation for tonight.
I think we all just needed to get just have a 2025 vent session at the
Yeah.
end.
Doug, we might ask whether there's a public comment on this since we've been so vociferous.
Well, okay. I see there is one member of the public present, and I see that. Let's bring over Sarah Barr.
Hi, everyone. I just, as you all know, I'm turning into your #1 planning board fan and faithfully following the conversations around housing. And I just really appreciate your reflection and insight. And one piece of information that might be of value to this group is we announced on Friday at the faculty meeting about the housing project that we're working on to try to understand workforce housing. And we're
Sarah,
working
you
with.
probably ought to say who you work for.
Oh, sorry. I work at Amherst College, and I'm responsible for the college's relationship with the town, which is part of the reason why I'm coming to the planning board meeting in order to fully understand sort of the nature of the housing conversation in the town and what Amherst College might do, particularly in the area of workforce housing. So, you know, Amherst College does college really well. But we're new to the conversation around housing. So we have hired U3 Advisors, which is the real estate consulting firm that was referenced earlier in the meeting, to help us understand our housing parcels or the parcels that we might be able to use for housing, the market pressures facing our workforce, and some of the possibilities for the college. So really excited about that. I'm also trying to attend housing subcommittee meetings of the planning board to understand the conversation there as well. So again, thank you all for your thoughtfulness. Excited to partner with the town on the challenge of housing, and just, you know, looking forward to the year ahead.
Thank you, Sarah. Sarah, can I ask you a question before you leave?
Of course.
How is, you know, was it maybe a year ago when it was revealed that the new Barry Roberts project kind of behind the Amherst College store was going to be occupied by students? And I just wondered how that is working for the college.
Uh, what's funny, I ran into the student body president who had been locked out of the building on Saturday when I was downtown. So he was waiting for someone to come and let him in. But the students seem extraordinarily happy. I know that we were having a bit of a crowding issue in one of the residence halls. So I think that there is some relief, but the building is beautiful. The students are happy. And then, one of the benefits to the town is, we pay property tax, or Barry pays property tax as the landlord on that property. So hopefully it's one of those things that's a win-win all around. Oh, the other thing that I'll add is that there has been a number of people that have seen like an increase in Amherst College student traffic downtown, meaning that they're shopping, they're going to events, and so hopefully that's also been a nice side benefit of having them downtown.
Great. You can ignore that end of your 3 minutes. But okay, thank you. All right, Angus.
Hi, everyone. Just wanted to disclose that Amherst College is my employer.
Yes.
But also I have students who live in that property and they love it. They love it so much. They love being so close to downtown, and they talk a lot about going into downtown more than I've heard other students talk about it. They've also talked about how like just nice it is compared to a lot of the other residence halls that they've lived in. And then I was also just going to say that I'm not a part of any of these conversations at Amherst College, but I know there is talk about possibly expanding the student body, which would still, be like an extra 200 or 300 students maybe, but there is talk about that. So I think Amherst College not only doing what Sarah Barr is doing, but if they were to expand the student body, would also be thinking about more housing for them.
Okay. All right. Time is 9:33. Nate, maybe that's enough of general housing discussion tonight?
No, that was great. Yeah, yeah, like I said, I think we can focus again in January. I think there's a lot of topics, and so really being realistic. I think I do want to be ambitious, but then and even if we don't get 7 amendments ready in the spring, but we have this list, and let's maybe we set it up year 1, year 2, and just keep working on it. So in the past, what would happen is we have all these ideas, and then they just fall off the wagon, right? Or we would just totally switch ideas. And the idea of having a list is at least we can reflect back on it, add things to it, and try to build on what we've been doing, or what the housing production plan says, what new goals might be for the town manager this coming year with the council, but really trying to keep everything in context. And so if, for instance, like North Amherst isn't successful, I think we'll have gained a lot of experience. We understand the overlay process. Could we adapt it to somewhere else, right? For instance, but like not just lose that kind of research and knowledge, and can we move it and adapt it somewhere else? And so I feel like we haven't historically been doing that, and I'd love to say like every year let's have a goal of getting 6 zoning amendments in front of council. And so not having a dry spell where we go 4 years without having a zoning amendment, but just try to keep, it doesn't always have to be housing related, but is it things that make procedurally the bylaw work better? And if the planning board or zoning board, you have ideas, email staff, and we add it to the list, and it's just things we keep talking about. So I think it was a good conversation.
All right. All right. Moving along, we'll go back to old business, up topic number 2, which was topics not anticipated 48 hours in advance. Did we have any, Nate or Pam? Nope. Similar for new business, any unanticipated? Nope. All right, Form A&R subdivision applications, anything?
No.
Nope. Upcoming ZBA applications, anything?
Nope.
No, Tom did mention that the reason they came with a preliminary subdivision is that there was a proposal to have a solar installation on that property. And it's going back through the Conservation Commission. It will then go to the zoning board. I think when I had gone to the zoning board of appeals a few years ago, the planning board asked to then have a presentation to provide comments to the ZBA, and so I'm assuming that could be the same. But when that gets to that point in the process, we'll let the board know.
Okay.
It's a pretty big project. It was, I don't know if it was like a 50 or 80 acre solar installation. So.
Mhm. Okay, upcoming SPP, SPR, and SUB applications. Anything?
I had mentioned the Southeast Street.
Yeah,
so
that's
Amir
still out
Mikchi,
there.
yeah, it's still out there. They're going through the Conservation Commission. It's something that we probably end up scheduling for either probably February at this point, but it would be, it'll be a pretty big mixed use building in East Amherst. And
Okay.
it'll probably need a number of waivers and discussions. Yeah.
Okay. Planning Board Committee and Liaison reports. Bruce, anything on PVPC?
Yes, we did have a meeting, and as you know, these meetings typically involve some presentation of something that the member towns or are interested in. This time it was a presentation on the Massachusetts Integrated Land Management Plan, or they call it MILUS. But basically, it's the state is undertaking a statewide review of the land. It's the land use planning statewide, looking at places where housing, this is citing for clean energy, agriculture, and the fourth one was a general economic benefit catch-all. This is not going to have teeth so much. In other words, it's not probably going to be an act where maybe like Oregon, where where the state gets into the planning entity business. It's apparently going to be more to structure incentive to be a basis for awarding grants and so forth, and depending how well a proposal fits in with the state's this land management plan as it evolves, so will the entities that are awarding grants be more or less favorable to making the grants depending on how it fits. So that seems to be the teeth, so to speak. But it's fairly broad thing, it seems to be, and I guess it's also intended to try and help interagency coordinations at a state level. Anyway, that was the presentation mostly. There wasn't much other business that happened, and when I get the presentation, which typically flows, I'll send it to you, Nate, and probably to everybody else just for interest. But that's what was on the agenda last week.
All right. Thank you, Bruce. Jesse's not here for Housing and Zoning Subcommittee. Does anybody want to speak on his behalf?
I think we did already.
Okay. All right. Angus, CPAC.
Yeah. Wow. So we are almost done with the presentations. We've got 4 or 5 more tomorrow. Been a lot. But also really interesting. There's just an enormous amount of requests for not a ton of money. The challenge that I'm curious to see how we navigate as a committee. The committee last year committed to a fair amount of bonding, which basically, increases the amount that the committee can award, but by putting debt obligations on future CPAC years. So, we have these huge capital projects that I I anticipate people are going to be pushing to do the same thing again. And, you know, on the one hand, I get it. On the other hand, I'm a little concerned because anytime that we're bonding, it means that we're paying interest to, you know, private lenders, which is not, you know, the best use of town money. But two, it also places burdens on future CPAC years. So curious to know if anyone has handled that in other situations. But that's the main thing. I'm going to be pushing pretty hard for the affordable housing proposals, which are even if we fully funded all three of them, would still make up, I think, a fourth of the available funds from that are we have to work with. So it feels like a very manageable lift, considering that's one of the kind of three main pillars of what the CPA is supposed to be funding. So we'll see if I'm successful, but that's my goal.
All right, thanks. Nate, anything on DRB?
Yeah, no, nothing on DRB. I think they may have reviewed one other sign proposal. They're going to meet again in January. You know, it's been pretty quiet with them. They will be, you know, looking at the design review standards. So, you know, maybe a combined meeting with the planning board or other boards. So, you know, we'll let you know. Yeah, and I think, you know, then it'll be good to hear from them, you know, in relation to the design review standards. I was going to say, Angus, for the CPA, yeah, if you want to, you can talk to me. I do think, yeah. So, you know, historically, the CPA, the committee's really tried to fund every proposal. This year, it's just, it'd be almost impossible. And future debt obligations, right, really limit how many, you know, available funds in the future years to fund projects. And so, yeah, I think it'll be a big discussion with the committee. I think that even next year there'll be more, you know, there'll be big capital requests, right? So how do you, you know, fund this year knowing you won't be able to do much next year? But
Go ahead, Angus.
Yeah, if I could just ask a question of the people who've lived here longer, it feels like there is an enormous amount of deferred capital projects that this town has been kind of, that in the last year or two, in the last few years, and ongoing, the town is facing. Is that an accurate kind of summation of things?
Well, I mean, there's been a lot of talk. I mean, there was a huge amount of talk about the new elementary school that's coming, you know, going to be completed this summer. That was a long, you know, multi-phase forward and back before it happened. And then the second one was the library, which, you know, finally is moving. And then the next two were the other two were the fire station and the DPW. And so those are the sort of the big four as far as I was concerned. I know there was also the track at the high school. But other than that, I'm not sure what, you know, maybe the War Memorial Pool building. That's pretty tired.
And I think there's a sense that Amherst lags in having a senior center behind pretty much every other town around us. So that would be a project that's waiting to be talked about. But
yeah, I think, Angus, to your point, I don't know if it's, you know, unique to Amherst, but so I feel like Amherst, you know, they updated in a lot of the recreation areas, right, in the late 70s and up to the mid 80s. And so for a time being, it was probably like, you know, Mill River was new, Groff was new, Plum Brook and all these places, but then, you know, not much happened. And so now all of a sudden it's 40, 50 years later, and it's like, okay, well, we have to spend millions of dollars because I don't know if the annual operating budget included those, you know, enough capital improvements. And so I'd say in more recent years, the town has a, you know, a financial policy in terms of what percentage of the budget goes to capital projects, but probably historically maybe it didn't. And so yeah, you know, so now it's like, okay, how do we fund these things? CPA is one, because you can fund housing, recreation, open space, and historic preservation. And so, you know, the town can use it, or other applicants, you know, entities can apply, but it's something that a lot of communities now are trying to use to pay for larger projects. So it can't be maintenance, but it can be like preservation or rehabilitation or, so yeah, I like the North Common, the project outside Town Hall, it's like, well, and the Kendrick Park playground is pretty new. And I know at the time when this was going through review and, at different levels, Public Works was saying, well, we actually, we should be getting more money annually to maintain these. And I don't know if that's happening, but it's just like, the nicer amenities you have to plan for, maintaining them, fixing them, whatever, as things come along. So, but I think, some of it's also the communities in the Northeast are old. So, like a lot of communities now are facing, their wastewater treatment plants are coming of age, that they need to be updated because of new regulations. Their water and sewer lines in the ground are really old, right? So it's not just Amherst, it's a lot of communities. The sidewalks are failing. So it's just hard when, yeah, you finally get some numbers and it's like, oh no, oh wow, okay. I know the CPA, right? There's millions of dollars in requests, right? It's like over 6 million for maybe.
And we have, yeah, for like 2.4 million of available funds.
Right. Yeah, it's a lot.
Well,
That's it. Thanks.
Speaking of old, I remember the year I was on CPAC, there was a request for maintenance of some of the historic cemeteries. And it's like, if you don't maintain that stuff, all the text gets worn off, and I think they needed new fencing around the cemeteries, and I mean, where do you stop, All right. Moving along, I guess. Thank you, Angus, for that update. Time is 9:48 and 48, yeah. I really don't have a report of chair other than to say, wish you all a happy holiday, and we'll see you next year. Hope you travel safely if you're traveling. Anything from staff, Nate and Pam?
No. Thanks, everyone. Yeah, good holidays. It's been a great year, and we'll, pick it up again in a few weeks.
Yeah. I'm going to interject one thing, Nate, that occurred to me when people were talking about maybe trying to engage with Paul Bockelman. It might be useful to bring in the new planning and economic development director too, just so he can hear the kinds of things that are going on or that we're talking about.
Yeah, no, and
I know I mentioned that last time, but just, if we're going to talk to Paul, maybe we need to have whatever his name is involved and not leave him out of the conversation.
No, thanks, agreed. And I was even thinking Dave Zomack, the assistant town manager. So having, offering that and, having them come to a meeting early next year.
Okay. All right. That's 9:49. We are adjourned. Have a great holiday. We'll see you in 2026. Hard to believe.
I know.
Happy New Year.
All right. Good night. Night, Pam.
Good night. Happy holiday.
Same to you.